The chairperson's business, so members will be aware there was a letter sent from the Children's Law Centre to the Education Minister, and that was copied into the committee. So that is in your tabled packs, and it's quite a significant piece of correspondence in relation to the current SEN reform, and especially the reform of the SEN framework. So I have no doubt with our evidence sessions later on today, a lot of these issues will get aired in terms of questions for both the department and the EA. But I did want to reflect on a few things just to highlight from the correspondence. I think it's important to note this is a really significant intervention from the Children's Law Centre, and it's not just a single organisation. It's a range of organisations have signed that letter, and I think most notably the teaching unions. If we're going to bring anybody with us on these reforms, it must be the teaching workforce. And they are reflecting a range of concerns that I think we're all well aware of, and this committee has heard substantial evidence on. So I want to be really clear at the outset that the SEN system needs reform. There is no argument from me on that whatsoever, but it has needed reform for well over a decade. I think that's probably being kind in terms of timescale. So this is not a new challenge that we're facing. And I do think it is important to note that we have had successive DUP education ministers that have failed to deliver on the SEN reform. We have known about this for years. And I would add, executive parties collapsing the institutions have done nothing to create the political space where I think reform could actually have meaningfully been delivered. But I want to be clear, I support reform, and I trust that everyone around this table in the committee does as well. But we have to listen to stakeholders, and I think the correspondence from the Law Centre, who I think they have highlighted in their letter, they hold significant institutional memory on these issues. They know the processes we've been through on this, and it is appropriate we should listen to them. And crucially, the unions who represent the teaching workforce, they are saying they're overwhelmed. And I think we need to be really clear that any attempt to bring a programme of SEN reform that is being done to the system is not going to succeed. The system has to be brought with both the department and EA to make it a success. So I think when we're hearing concerns raised about a system on the brink of collapse and teachers feeling that they are unable to cope with the notion of a brand new framework kicking in for September, I think this committee needs to stop and listen. But I think crucially the EA and the department need to stop and listen. I would be very concerned. And I was at an event, and we were talking about it before committee started. I was at an event at the Balmoral Hotel, which was a consultation event last week on these planned reforms and the enhanced support model. And I characterised it at that event as I really am concerned we're putting the cart before the horse. We are talking about what do we do with children who have a statement, what do we do to ensure that model is changed. But it feels to me the conversation about early intervention, about what we do in early years, about how we can make these local impact teams actually work, resource them properly, staff them properly, so that they can step in to meet the need. I think that conversation seems to have dropped off, and I am worried we're going to do something way downstream when the challenges exist upstream and need to be addressed there. So we do need to listen, we need to stop, and we need to, I would urge the Minister and the EA to consider whether a pause at this time is appropriate, given the seriousness of the concerns that are being raised. And I want to be very clear, that's not a pause on reform. We don't stop the reform agenda. We need to continue with the work on reform. But on the other side of this consultation on the enhanced support model, I think there needs to be an opportunity for everybody to catch their breath. Because if the system is overwhelmed, there needs to be work done to bring the system with the EA, with the department, to deliver this change. And I think we need assurances that whatever comes back in that consultation is actually listened to, that there is heed given to it, and that it is not a tick box and then on to the next item on the EA's agenda. So we're all aware pace of change has been raised across a whole range of issues in relation not just to SEN reform, but it seems to me that on SEN reform we are looking at serious crisis territory. We're in a position of a complete burning platform in terms of our services. We're looking at potentially budgets that could bankrupt the education system, and we're looking at interventions that across the board people are saying they can't objectively identify if the needs of children are being met. None of us can stand over that, and it's incumbent on all of us who have any interest, I think, in the education system to get serious about this. So I know members will want to comment, and I apologise for the length at which I've spoken, but I have reflected at length on that correspondence because it is a serious. It's not a cheap shot in my view. It's a serious piece of correspondence that has come through from these organisations. So I think on that, I'll spare you all any further contributions from me, but I would say I think that regardless of the evidence session today, we should as a committee be writing to the Minister and the EA. We should be sharing that correspondence, and we should be asking for their clear assurances that they are listening and that they will ensure, if a pause is appropriate, to ensure that the system is in a place it can actually work with them to deliver reforms, that they will give due consideration to that. And I think we need to hear from them clearly as to how they will respond to these really quite serious concerns. So that would be my proposal. I'm happy to open it up to other members through the Deputy Chair first, and then we can go from there and see if there's anything in particular we want to do as an action. But we do have officials in today, and no doubt members will want to raise these issues.
I absolutely agree on the need for reform, not just in terms of saying, but also in terms of curriculum. But this Minister doesn't seem to be listening. He seems to be more interested in ram-stamming reforms through, even though it's clear that these reforms are creating more problems within the system, that the system isn't ready to deal with them. And Cathy and I and Danny were talking earlier about examples we know where assessments and statements are being manipulated, deliberately manipulated, so that no one can say a child has been given an inappropriate place. And that's wrong, and that's, in my view, and we already know that morale within the EA is at rock bottom, and people are being forced to manipulate, as I say, the situation. It's completely out of order. Now, to me, what is so serious about this correspondence is who it's from. In any issues I have had, my go-to organisation is the Children's Law Centre, and particularly Rachel Hogan, because there's no one in my experience has the knowledge and the experience she has of the special educational needs within our education system. And when they say we're in a crisis and that some of the things that are happening may not even be lawful, that's one of the most serious things that could possibly happen. The Minister just absolutely needs to recognise what's happening. He needs to listen to people who are out there at the cold face and pause this until he's in a position to move forward with the support of the workforce and with other stakeholders within the system. All of them.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I think workforce is key, because all of this, and the letter is clear, is predicated on a workforce that, as far as I can tell, doesn't exist. It's a health workforce that is not there and available to the education system. It is a properly trained and supported classroom assistant workforce that currently does not exist. The terms and conditions that cohort of staff are operating under do not set them up to engage in a programme of reform. So I think, again, if you deliver a programme of reform that's predicated on a workforce that, to me, simply does not exist, we're sequencing this in completely the wrong way.
Yeah, and just one final point, Chair, because in order for this system to work, there needs to be cooperation and collaboration at the highest level between the Health Department and the Education Department, and whatever other departments are needed as well, but primarily health and education. And we saw from the example of the summer schemes for special schools that collaboration is non-existent. So,
regrettably, these are well-rehearsed issues, but I think sometimes it takes an intervention from key stakeholders to perhaps bring it to the fore.
Sure, we've been talking about them for 2 years.
Yeah. Cara, you've indicated, and I'll look for indications from others.
Just to say, I agree with the sentiment so far. I think we're being fair and measured. We understand the severe need for reform, but ultimately we're politicians, we're not experts. The experts are telling us this isn't going to work, particularly at the speed that it's currently going, and there's a real sense of urgency. But again, we have those workforce pressures. There was issues with the consultation period, the length And I think it's really important that we listen to those that are on the ground each and every day, know this work, know our children with special educational needs. And if possible, Chair, I think it is important that we try and get the Minister before the committee as soon as possible, whether it's this, the summer schemes, or the challenges with school placements coming up as well. I think we really need clarity about what the future will look like. Yes, reform is necessary, but if a pause is what's needed right now to make it the best it can be, the best outcome possible, then I think it's important we listen to our experts and then move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. And I think the point around the Minister's attendance, we do have the Minister in the forward work programme towards the end of June. The committee has capacity in June to hear the Minister earlier, so I am more than happy to ask for an earlier briefing if that can be provided. I think we have asked previously, and that is perhaps the earliest date that he's able to make available, but absolutely support that we should have the Minister in here at the earliest opportunity. Any other indications? So Peter and then Danny.
Kathy, I think was in the
Was it Kathy? Sorry.
Thanks.
I'll take your direction, Peter.
ladies first.
Look, I'm not going to say anything that hasn't already been said. This is extremely concerning to wake up to this morning. And Chair, you mentioned like we could be on the edge of a crisis here. I think we're full slap bang in the middle of a crisis. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Speak to teachers, speak to principals all the time, and what they're saying is like, what on earth is it going to take for this Minister to wake up and see what is happening on the ground? This is children's rights now that we're talking about harming, and it's in black and white in this letter. But the truth is, and the Deputy Chair's outlined it already, families, schools, this committee, we've heard from Senkos, everybody that sits in front of us during our inquiry has been saying this for months and months, and I just don't know how many times Richard Pengelly and Paul Given need to hear it before something is done. And we're seeing the outworkings of it. We're seeing classroom assistants being cut, the threat of it. We're seeing children sitting in the wrong placements. We're seeing schools not getting the support that they need to deliver for these children. And the outworkings of it is with parents lying awake at night worrying about what's happening to their children and what the future holds for them. And you mentioned, Chair, at the same time, when all this is going on, our teachers and our school leaders are being pushed to the absolute brink. They are in despair. Health and education can't seem to work together. And while it might sound like it, none of this is about politics. It's all about those children, and that's what I think everybody collectively wants, the place that we want to get to, and everybody wants to work together to get to that place. But the Minister has to listen. And I agree with Cara, what she had said. He needs to come in front of this committee ASAP. This should be top of his priority list. He needs to come in and he needs to answer to that. So I'm happy to write to him about listening to this, but what action is he going to take, and is he going to come in and answer questions on it?
I would return that theme to the issues we think it was last week. We revisited the issues of placement when we were discussing it. You know, we were still awaiting any kind of public statement from the Minister on that. And anybody with a pair of eyes in their head can see we are heading into exactly the same process with placements that we have in previous years, which is completely unacceptable for children with special educational needs. And I think we can't just have a Minister who's a Minister of good news. He has to be able to front up when there are issues in the system. And I think if there was a sense of collaboration, we all need to work together to deal with this. Well, I'm very much open to that. But we're sitting with a date hanging over us of October 2025 as the key date for resolving placements crisis, and I think we're well past that, and that was evidence given to this committee. Peter, you'd indicated.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I have read the letter. I think even in terms of the discussion so far at this committee, I think, and Kathy to a degree referenced it in her contribution, the key thing is that children are at the centre of all this. So it's about how we make things better for the children. Now, that needs to be our core focus. You referenced in your earlier statement, Chair, that what we might call status quo is not acceptable. And it's not for the parents, it's not for the kids. And so something needs to happen. And we have this reform. Now, people can have different views on it, and CLC have made their views fairly clear. But what we also have to understand is that the context of this is the sheer and increasing number of kids who are presenting with really challenging needs in Northern Ireland, and I haven't been on the committee. I was off it for about a part of 6 months, so I haven't really been part of the inquiry per se, and I don't know whether the committee is considering looking at why we have this increase in numbers. I would have thought that would have been very prevalent. But that does put pressure on the system, as other members have mentioned. It puts pressure on places. It puts pressure on special needs schools who are catering for some of the more children who are challenged, in particular around some issues. And so something needs done. And I would be really surprised if the signatories on this letter were saying, well, look, no, we like it the way it is, because as other people have mentioned, having 6 or 7 classroom assistants in a class is not the best for those children. There are better models out there. And my understanding is that these reforms are being introduced over a period of time. It's not like there's this is out for consultation, and certainly I would encourage everyone to respond to that. But, these aren't being introduced at the end of the year. This is a
the
program.
timescales are September 26 for the new framework to begin rollout.
I understand that, but I'm talking about the rollout is not at September 26 in terms of the changes that are going to be implemented. And the other thing, just on one aspect of the CLC letter, on page 3 it says, plans are afoot through the EA enhanced support model to delegate legal duties to schools which belong to the EA and CLC's view. This is unlawful and outside the powers of the EA. I mean, that can't, a department or an arm's length body can't do something that's illegal. And I'd be interested to hear what officials' views, and they're coming in today, are on that particular line, because they can't do that. That might be the opinion of CLC, but I don't think it's factual. But anyway, some thoughts from me, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. And we do have the Law Centre scheduled to give evidence next month, and the department specifically on the new draft SEN regulations that are coming forward, which factor into all of this. I wouldn't characterise the letter as saying that there should be no change to the status quo. I think the letter, as I read it, seemed quite open to the need for reform, but I think the concern is the pace and the capacity for the reform on the current timescale, and potentially whether all of the interventions are appropriate. I can't pass comment if they're lawful or not, and that's for others to comment on.
Sure.
So Danny and then Michelle.
Yeah, I just say, I would love to hit the reset button, and this is probably an opportunity for the department and the minister and the EA to listen and hit the reset. They should stall, in my opinion, because as it's been pointed out, the experts in the field are saying that there's serious consequences with this reform. And it's not just this piece of reform. We are seeing it with Transform Ed as well. Our school leaders have been saying for the past number of years that they're being bombarded with consultations and surveys. At what point are they going to be listened to? Because the interpretation out there is that when you bombard the system, then you can put through your ideologies. And if I'm going to be honest, just listening to the remarks here, I could have closed my eyes and that could have been someone from Reform saying what you said about the high prevalence of children now with coming through with additional needs. We have heard evidence time and time again that the percentage of children who have always had additional needs hasn't really changed. The fact is, they deserve the support like any other child. And to me, it's ministers and some political ideologies out there who just don't want to give them that. And it's always firefighting, so they have to plan and get it right. The foundations are not there for these plans. It was very clear from some of the very early meetings we had when we came back into these institutions, listening to whether it was the Education Authority or the department, that health wasn't at the table. We heard the names change. I don't know how many times they finally they have the lit team. We've already heard from Senkos who have come in here, from people who contact our offices who work in the lit teams. They are telling us it's not working, the changes aren't working. So at some point, someone has to stop and listen. Is there probably some good things happening? Of course there is. There has to be. Not everything can be negative. But this is a chance to reset, get round the table with the right people, start listening. Because see, if you don't do it, look, I have lost faith in this minister long ago. I would love for that to change. This is an opportunity for him to show leadership, and if he doesn't do it this time, he's not going to do it. And that's with everything he's trying to ram down the system's throats, because that's exactly how it's being perceived, because people can't get a break.
Yanni. Michelle.
Thank you. I'm going to echo, of course, what everybody has said. I think everybody's been really measured in what they've said. That the system needs reformed is something that we all agree on, but the system also needs to be stabilised before we can actually implement those reforms. There needs to be genuine collaboration between the people who are expected to deliver this and who are expert in terms of the needs of the children and the capacity within schools. And that's how we can best deliver for the children who are at the centre of all of this. We are in a crisis right now. The fact that the foundations that this is being built upon are so unstable means the more and more pressure that we put on it, the risk is that reform, especially at pace, is going to create more strain. This whole thing could collapse, and that doesn't help anybody. So the recommendation from the letter is that there's a pause. I don't know if the officials today can articulate the benefits of continuing versus pausing, because I think we need to be clear on that. Everybody wants this to work. We want to see this system improved. But at the end of the day, I'm genuinely worried about schools and teaching staff. We're going to have a motion next week on Senkos. We know the strain that workforce is under, who are critical to this. I'm worried about the people in the EA as well. I think they're being put under pressure to deliver at pace as well, to deliver for the Minister's objectives and that perception that he's getting things done. If this collapses, that's what he'll have achieved, and nobody wants that. We've talked about accountability as well in terms of the Minister coming here and speaking to us. Richard Pengelly needs to come as well. We keep saying officials who are senior, but the most senior people should be the people who are addressing us and answering these questions. And I think someone from health as well. If we could get something together, I think that brings these people together so that we can collectively ask questions and understand this, I think that would be very helpful. So I appreciate the intervention. I think it's a credible intervention. But it also feels a little like Groundhog Day, that we continue to have these conversations again and again. And I really think there needs to be a proper, sensible taking stock of this so that we can get it right. This is not about just scoring points or trying to undermine people. There are questions to answer. I think there is some politics in this, but at the end of the day, if we're going to deliver for these children, perhaps this is an opportunity for a bit of a sense check.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, I think, Sir Peter, you wanted to go in just
Yeah, if I could just, obviously Danny referenced my comments. Look, I'm not in reform. Danny knows I'm in the DUP. I started my comments, actually, and I think I was only one, who started my comments saying about children being at the centre of this. I think Danny said that the numbers weren't changing. I don't know, Danny, if that's right. And that's fact.
The percentage of the population who have additional needs has never really changed. It sits around 17-18%.
So we have a growing number of children in Northern Ireland. You would accept that of children who have these needs. The driver in this for me is how we support those kids. We've talked about teachers, we've talked about the unions, we've talked about Children's Law Centre. There's children here who need supported, and it is not acceptable that we just go. And I don't want to characterise anyone saying this, that status quo is okay. The status quo is not okay for these children. And I'm not saying you did. I'm saying if that was a position, we would be failing these children, because there's lots of children need help. And what this agenda is trying to do is actually support these children in a more effective way. Now, we might have views of whether that's right or wrong, but what we can agree in this committee is that these children need help, and something needs done to the system. And that something can't wait. It might be okay for us as politicians to wait and see what happens, but it's not acceptable for the kids. And it's children in the middle of this that do need support, and they need support through reform.
Those advocating for the children's rights are telling you that this isn't right.
So we have CLC, through the chair, we have the letter from CLC, and I accept there's a long list of signatories at the end of that, Danny, and that is their view, and we can't challenge them on it because they're not in front of us. But I would be surprised. I'd be happy to write back to these people and say, do you support the status quo? Is the status quo okay?
They said they don't.
So what is their suggestion, though, again through the chair, in terms of this? We are criticised up here for not actually passing legislation. We're criticised up here for dithering and not doing things when actually there's clear and identifiable problems that it's our job to solve. We're trying to do that.
I understand that, and if I can just come in here, I certainly don't read the letter as supporting the status quo. In fact, it lists the whole range of areas where reform is required. So I don't think I wouldn't accept that characterisation of the correspondence. But we do have CLC coming in to give evidence, so we will have the opportunity to question them in detail on this and on the SEN regs that they're coming in to present on. I would like to make a suggestion, because Peter, on some of the points you've made, I fundamentally do agree with you. We must place...
Should be quite worrying for you then, Chair.
We must place children at the centre of this, and we must be clear the status quo is not acceptable. We cannot operate a committee where we complain and then say, but don't ever change anything. That's not acceptable.
No.
But I think we also do need to seek clear assurances from the Minister and the EA that they are listening, that the system is saying we feel at a point of complete tipping point here, that things could go into free fall, and that if they're saying that I think the Minister and the EA need to provide assurances they will take a breath, they will listen to these concerns, and they will engage. I don't think that's unreasonable from my perspective. But is the status quo acceptable? Absolutely not. So I think I know this is an issue that people care deeply about, so I will bring people in. So I think both Michelle and then Cathy had asked to come in. So.
It's just, I find sometimes when we have these conversations, and this happens quite a lot in this committee, that then there's a mischaracterisation of what people said. If somebody looked at what you said, Peter, they're in isolation, it would suggest that we're all at odds with each other in this issue. I think everyone was absolutely clear that reform is needed. I don't think anybody said anything other than this should be about the children. So there's a mischaracterisation. I think it's deliberate to make it look like the voice of reason versus all of us. Nobody says, and nobody even in this letter suggests what's happening now is acceptable. There's debate here over the pace of change, the way that change is being implemented, the level of consultation, and those are all really legitimate things to be bringing up and for us to be raising. So the idea that Danny said something he didn't like about reform, therefore it's us versus that, it's not. We're all broadly in agreement. There are legitimate points here to address, and I think that's something I think happens a lot in this committee. I just wanted to kind of maybe just make that general point, that kind of reframing things as if we're all at odds with each other when sometimes we're actually, and I think in this issue we're broadly in agreement, would be much more constructive.
Look, I think Cathy wanted to have just a point, I think, in reply to something that was said, and then we will draw a line. It's been quite top heavy here in the agenda, but I don't think we could have sat on that correspondence and not discussed it. So Cathy, and then if we're in agreement on some correspondence.
Thanks. Sure. Yeah, Peter, and it's unfortunate that it's probably yourself that's bearing the brunt of this.
No, it certainly seems that way over here. That's okay. Relatively broad shoulders.
I haven't spoken yet.
I know I'm usually quiet, Pat. That worries me.
I suspected that we would get the response that we got from yourself. I hoped we wouldn't, but I suspected that's what we got, an attempt to try and dissect the letter. I think Children's Law Centre, I don't think there's anybody or any other organisation out there who are as child-centred as the Children's Law Centre. Like Pat said, any issue that any of us have with children's rights, they're the people that we go to. So I think it's quite disingenuous actually to say that you're the only person who mentioned having children at the centre of this, because I think this letter has the children at the centre of it, and I also think each of us, in all of our contributions, it's about the children. I think everybody's more or less referenced this is not about playing politics with this, that we all care very, very deeply, and I know everyone on this committee devotes an awful lot of their time to their own constituents around special educational needs, but also in this committee around special educational needs. Something summed it up to me very early on. Whenever Richard Pengelly came into this committee, at the very outset, I was trying to give him examples of what was happening in schools. I asked him to listen to the schools. He completely blanked that, and he told me, Cathy, listen to the EA. And I think that's the problem. I think the EA think that they have all the answers. I think the department thinks they have all the answers, and they will not listen to anybody else. It needs to stop, and it needs to stop now, and they need to start listening.
I'll draw a line. I think everybody's had a good opportunity to air the views on this. Can I check in with all members then? I know there have been different emphases perhaps in how different members have approached this. But we agreed that it is appropriate to write to both the Minister of Education and the CEO of the Education Authority to seek an urgent response to this letter in terms of how they plan to engage with the stakeholders to address the concerns raised, and if they will give consideration on the other side of the consultation to take appropriate time to allow that stakeholder engagement to be undertaken, so that the next step in this process, there is confidence that the system is ready and believes it is the right step. Are we agreed on that? Okay. And I'll ask that a line go in that correspondence to be clear that the committee fundamentally does not accept that the status quo is acceptable in terms of SEN services, because I think the whole SEN inquiry we've been holding has highlighted that quite clearly. Okay, members, thank you for your patience in that item. We move on to item 3 in the agenda, which is declarations of interest.
Sorry, Chair, before you go on,
apologies,
just on matters arising, in regard to the committee bill on school uniforms, I wrote to the Minister, given that David had said at a previous committee meeting that the DUP wouldn't be opposing the committee bill, to ask the Minister to introduce into his statutory guidelines the right for girls to wear trousers to school. It would save the committee time, it would save expense, and so on and so forth. And I highlighted to him at the time the responses to the consultation that the committee carried out. He wrote back and said he hasn't seen the consultation. So would it be possible to furnish him with that, the results of that consultation?
Yeah, certainly happy to, and I was at Matters Arising was going to raise the committee bill, so perhaps we can deal with it all in one go as an item there. But no, I'm very happy to support that proposal, that we share the consultation responses, and again, if there is an opportunity for the committee to seek further confirmation from the Minister if he would consider amending his own statutory guidelines to address the issue of girls being allowed to wear trousers, it would save time, money, resource, all of that. So if members are agreed, are we agreed with that as an action? Agreed.
Clearly a busy man. I mean, the whole consultation bypassed him.
And there you have it. Well, when he's before the committee, you can raise that with him. It does just occur to me, sorry, Peter, is this a new item? Because we're not on Matters Arising yet.
That's excellent, because this is the Matter Arising.
Yes.
It's a declaration of interest. Just for transparency, I was a special advisor to the Education Minister when the Children and Young People Emotional Health and Wellbeing Framework was published. So just to...
Yes, so on declarations of interest, which I hadn't even got through that item yet before Peter's in.
Sorry.
It was to ask members if they had any declarations to make in relation to items on the agenda. It does occur to me, I should note that one of the signatories to the letter from the Children's Law Centre, Angel Eyes, my wife is an employee of that organisation, so I should note that. Any other declarations? No. Okay. Item 4, which is Matters Arising. So I would refer members in tabled papers to 2 draft timelines for the committee stages of the 2 private members' bills that the committee is currently looking at. So at page 4 of tabled papers we have the Irish Medium Workforce Plan Bill, and at page 5 of tabled papers we have the Education Holiday Meal Payments Bill. So I think at this stage I'll ask the clerk to speak to those 2 timelines, just in terms of the thinking behind the sequencing of that, and then happy to open up to seek members' views on the proposed timelines, and I would hope we can get agreement on a date for both those bills, and to bring a motion to the Assembly around any extension. So if I could just pass over to the clerk briefly on that.
Certainly, I'm just locating them. Okay, so members, you'll be aware from previous legislation that we plot out certain phases of the committee stage and allocate time to that based on previous experience. And so for the 2 private members' bills, we have done exactly the same. And we have tried to keep it a little bit shorter than usual. So like this time last year, we provided an indicative time frame that went up to December, and by that same reasoning, this would have also gone up until December, but obviously we're in the last year of the mandate and that's not feasible. So the 2 timelines that you see reflect just like a slight difference in, I suppose, the expectation that perhaps the holiday meal payments might take a little bit longer because more people might want to contribute their views to that one, whereas the Irish Medium Workforce one is slightly more strategic and high level, and might get done a little bit more quickly. But you'll see that we have, where did it just go? The times, the number of weeks for each allocated. And that's an attempt to make a reasonable guess and make sure that if anything unexpected comes up, you'll not be stuck. So there's only one opportunity to extend committee stage. The committee stage for these bills would normally end, if you didn't extend it, the initial 30-day period would end on the 27th of May. The surveys which have gone out for both bills, the deadline for those is the 15th of June. So obviously you're going to need to have some initial extension. And if the surveys only come back in on the 15th of June and the Assembly goes into summer recess at the start of July, that doesn't leave very much time at all to try to finalise a bill report before the summer. So I'm just trying to manage expectations and give an idea of the factors that are at play. So the let's see, we've got the call for evidence lasts for 8 weeks, which is good practice. As I've just said, a motion to extend would be required to take us beyond the 27th of May. So depending on your decision today, we'll bring a motion with the correct date in it for next week's meeting. The call for evidence closes on the 15th of June. And then if you gave 3 weeks subsequent to that for oral evidence sessions, that would take you up to summer recess. And then you could have deliberation of the bill and consideration of any draft amendments for a couple of weeks in September, followed by formal clause by clause consideration and also consideration of the first draft of a report taking you into October. And then agree a draft report and order that to be printed, taking you to kind of mid-October. So there's just a week's difference in the two timelines. And as we've said before, the end of a committee stage is a destination rather than a target. It's to give you space to properly consult people about this and make sure that the proposal is the way that you want it to go to the House. And to give you time as well to commission any amendments that you may wish, because those don't, the actual legal text of the amendment has to be ready for the committee report before that can be finalised. So those are the considerations behind the two timelines in your pack. And yeah, I'm happy to hear what everyone considers about that.
No, that's great, and thank you for bringing those two timelines and talking us through that. If I could just open with my initial thoughts, and then happy to open up the floor to members. I would just highlight, I think we have left significant amount of slack in our agenda in June, so and I thought there is some slack in May as well, given that we anticipated legislation coming through, and we do have to bear in mind that there is departmental legislation likely to be coming through the pipeline as well. So I would want to make a suggestion at this stage that whatever final date we land on, that we probably should commit to using the evidence, the slots that we have before the summer recess to start hearing evidence. I wouldn't, and I don't think actually in the forward work plan we have waited. We have evidence already potentially coming through.
So we're parallel processing
the
evidence session and the survey taken.
So given that evidence can come in well in advance of those closure dates of the 15th of June, I think there is scope to come to an earlier finish date, because I don't see any advantage in the committee stockpiling bills that when we know that there are more coming through. I think it just could create an unmanageable workload. So my suggestion would be that we perhaps have a think about who we anticipate we are going to need to hear evidence from, and perhaps work from there in terms of how much time we will need. And I would just put it out there, my thoughts are in terms of the Deputy Chair's private member's bill. I think the number of people likely to want to give evidence, because it is one particular set of stakeholders, it may not be substantial, and there may well be scope to go through that quickly. In terms of Danny's bill, there might be a few more, but I have a sense as well there would be an opportunity to perhaps hear evidence on block from groups who perhaps are part of the same consortiums in the anti-poverty space and all of that to help with timescales. But my sense would be that there may well be more evidence required on Danny's bill, and I think the timescale should reflect that. So those are my thoughts. I'll bring the Deputy Chair in and then round the other members.
Well, Chair, you've summarised my bill quite accurately there, that there will probably be a small number of witnesses. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there will be Altram, who represents early years in the Irish medium sector. We'll have Corleon and Gail Sculliachta. We'll have principals from the two post-primary Irish medium schools.
I've contacted all of them already, and some of them are in the programme.
And outside of that, I mean, I'm not looking for anyone else to come. Perhaps when the call for evidence goes out, there may be others who want to come and give evidence, but I would still expect it to be a very small number. The bill itself, as we know, there's only one substantive clause. So in terms of the work that's going to go into this, I mean, I would expect it to be finished quite quickly. I would be hoping to have the committee stage finished long before the summer recess. I don't see why we should prolong it any further. I mean, with expectations that the Minister's going to be bringing forward more legislation. I mean, what we don't want is to end up with a backlog, and of course the Minister's legislation will probably take priority. I'm not sure what way it works in committee, but certainly in terms of the Assembly itself, executive legislation takes priority. So, I mean, I would want to get these out of the road as quick as possible, and Danny can speak to his own bill.
Okay, I think, Danny, you'd indicated happy to bring you in and then to hear from others.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I suspect a lot of the sector will say the same things, because I done, as you know, we all have to do our own consultations anyway and all of that work. It's been 2 years in the making. I was actually going to raise this separate to what I'm going to say about the bill. Look, I've been meeting with stakeholders continuously. I had a really great meeting at the end of last week and the start of this week with Citizens of Face, along with Feeding Britain. They are putting forward together their own stakeholders group. That'll be next month. They're actually going to write to the committee to invite everybody, and that's going to be May the 13th. So it'll be probably coming in officially. So people said it's going to be everyone from the anti-poverty strategy, and like some of the outwork into that's going to be a joint letter being written to the committee to say how much they support it. And of course they have other campaigns as well around thresholds, around universal free school meals. We've heard all that there before, but in particular to the piece of legislation that I brought forward, I think a lot of the stakeholders are going to say the same thing. And I just want to say this to members, is that we done this for the Minister's Uniform Bill on the premise that we want to support families as quickly as possible. Like, I want a good committee stage, and I think we can absolutely do that in a shorter period of time than what's being proposed now, because I really don't want to miss out. If it is the will of the House to support the bill, I don't want to miss out on holiday periods, because that will stop the support going to children. So look, I would be like to see it done quicker. I think it can be done. We did do it for the Minister's bill. We were very successful, and if anybody thinks that we can't do it, if you think about the amendments this committee alone brought forward to that bill, there's 18. You know, now we didn't get the result we wanted in the end, but the work that we put into that was second to none, and I have no doubt every member in here would do the same to support children, regardless whether they agree with the principle of the bill or not. They will work at pace, and I have that faith in this committee particularly. So I would ask, and I have a date in my head, I would like a target of July 3rd to be wrapped up for committee stage. I really would. I think it's doable.
Okay, so clearly the bill sponsors are going to want to move through the process as quickly as possible. Other members might have different different views on that, so I'm happy to open it up. Peter, you indicated that.
Find me a bill sponsor who doesn't want to get their bill through as quickly as they could. I suppose my first question, I guess, was for the clerk before I come on the overall timescales, and that is that on Pat's bill, it's 5 weeks from deliberation to report printed, and on Danny's, it's 6 weeks from deliberation to report printed. Are those standard timescales for the committees? Sorry,
Yes.
You're munching there. That was a bad timing for me. I should have talked for another 10 seconds, which I can do.
So yeah, those are standard. I mean, we look at the various things that need to be done.
Yep.
And plot it out, and there is discussion, behind the scenes to kind of try to affect consistency across committees. Yeah. So
Okay, so those are
it's not a standalone.
Yeah. So look, in general terms, I would say that the way that these have been laid out, I would be content with, given that assurance from the clerk that they're fairly standard. I don't think it puts any either Danny's or Pat's under any particular pressure as we move towards the end of the mandate. And maybe I would tend to agree with Pat a little bit that that maybe that call for evidence could be taken down to 6 weeks. I think it's a fairly, but I suppose the other point I'd make is that you don't know, and to be fair, and I probably think the chair would agree with me on this one, that actually we've got a bill at the moment in my committee. The scrutiny process is really, really important. Effectively, that House says to us, this is your job and we rely on you to do this right, because when it comes back up there for fourth stage, the arguments have been made and the positions agreed. So it is a really crucial stage. I wouldn't be averse to taking Pat's down 2 weeks on the evidence on the basis of the argument so far, but I'd probably still want to hold in general terms to what's been suggested so far by yourself, Chair, in terms of the overall timescales, would be my view.
Thank you, Peter. And I think it is important. It came through particularly on the second stage of Danny's about there being an appetite to make sure we got the scrutiny right. So it's always about finding the balance, and we'll do our best to do that. Cara, you'd indicated there.
Yeah, just to come in to say it's understandable, I suppose. Both bill sponsors are keen to see it go through. I think particularly on holiday hunger, given the severity of the issue in the north, if there are any opportunities, I think to quicken it up, I think it's important to support and to do so. And I understand Peter's point about the importance here. Ultimately, it's about scrutiny, but at the end of the day, I think particularly with the holiday hunger piece, anything we can do to support children out there and get this moving quicker. And I think the public want to see us be as effective as possible as well. So I don't mind either way. I'd be happy to support.
Right, thank you, Cara. No other indications at this stage, so we do need to make a decision on this. I'll get the ball rolling to throw it out there. The one concern I suppose I have just looking at it is if the call for evidence closes on the 15th and there is an appetite on the back of that for any additional evidence sessions if someone comes in late, or there is an appetite for amendment, we're very, very close up to the date of recess. But I do think on the other side of summer, my feeling is there's opportunity to bring the time back considerably. And I think we can be very focused in terms of, I think particularly on Danny's bill, of getting those groups to present together. Even if there's the option of a committee stakeholder event, although you've arranged a stakeholder event, you probably don't want to put too much of a burden on the sector. But if there's an appetite for oral evidence, there may well be, we know the sort of anti-poverty consortium that exists in Northern Ireland who may want to present together. So
they are narrowly scoped, and we are likely to get 2 more bills from the Minister. I don't know how big they are in May. So it's just to kind of not leave ourselves too tight, but they are narrowly scoped, and
so
the committee can focus.
I'll put it out there as a discussion starter then. In terms of the Deputy Chair's bill for the Irish Medium workforce plan, if something fairly soon after summer recess, so in September, feels like a reasonable time scale, just to ensure that slack's in there if there was an amendment or any additional evidence that we needed to come through. And then perhaps Danny's, I would be suggesting, could be moved towards the end of September and not slip into October. And that feels you're given a 6-month run in then for the remainder of the stages, which feels hopefully doable.
Can I just ask the point around then the uniform bill? Because we managed to get it done. Is it something similar in the time frames? One of them was like the time frame was like the end of August or September, but you were on recess, so it was brought forward, and we got it done and got it done really, really good. Can I just ask what the difference would be then, and why we couldn't do that?
Ask the clerk to just remind me of the timings
on that. There was no reflection on the scrutiny of the bill, was there not?
Yeah, there was. So and there were more provisions. But I think the committee committed to having additional meetings, and that might be necessary if you were going to try to get in before recess.
Yeah, I would be up. That's I'd be up for that. There, I'll present in the committee every single week if you need me to.
So that would be a matter for the committee just to decide, if that's something. Yeah, but that is the difference.
Just as wanted to check in terms of how long the committee stage actually ran for the school uniforms bill, just so that we are we're making sure we can.
So initially it was extended to 3rd of December, and then
back to the 3rd of July.
Your amendment was to the 3rd of July, was it? And then the committee finally went for.
I love the fact you're looking at me, Irene, and wanting some sort of legitimate response on that question.
I think it was your amendment.
You may as well ask me what the capital of Kyrgyzstan is.
It was 4 months. It was the 3rd of March to the 3rd of July.
Yeah,
it was the uniform bill.
And with recesses, it's hard.
Quite similar then.
We're sort of 6 weeks, I think, probably off that in terms of where we are now. So it would be a little bit shorter. So look, I don't think. I hope we can get through this without having to divide. I think there is a I'm getting a sense from everyone around the room that there's no interest in delaying any of this unnecessarily. I would be proposing, and I'll probably, in my own defence, I was the lone voice arguing for the school uniform bill to go on a bit longer, and my sense actually as we approached the end of that stage was that it was unnecessarily frantic, and that we were...
I do remember that, Chair.
Yes.
Yeah.
You remember the night?
Remember that one? I don't remember what I proposed, Danny, but I do remember.
Yeah, so that's not an experience I'll ever forget, proposing that committee extension motion. But I think that I suppose I would just say, I mean, I was concerned that if you would have the summer recess period again, if there were any amendments, that you're giving Assembly staff time to draft those from the Bills office if there was anything like that in the mix. But I really would not, I'm certainly not proposing anything substantially beyond that. It's really just to build that bit of slack for September. But
September needs work.
Well, it's when the Assembly returns is the question on that.
So I don't think the business office has decided, but
okay.
Isn't that right, Mark? It's still not decided. Yeah, so it would be usual for the business committee to come back, say the 7th or something like that, and committees to begin the following week.
Can I make a suggestion? September 18th for Irish Media and Workforce, and September 25 for Danny's bill. I mean, I feel that just gives us that slack to make sure we cover any amendments. And that's it, and my sense is that's a good 6 month run in then for the remaining stages. But I'm happy to hear. I mean, I know it's slightly odd maybe having the bill sponsors on the committee, but want to make sure everyone's had the opportunity to give feedback on that if that's causing any concerns for anybody.
Chair, that's a month earlier than was suggested. But look, I'm content with that as a compromise. But it's up to the bill sponsors whether they are.
Well, it's up to the committee.
It's up to the committee, but I know what they're going to say. They're going to say we want it finished by June, but given the timescales that we have, and I think in balance, look, it is what it is. You could put it to a vote, and clearly you'd have the numbers push it through. But I think in balance, we're going to take 4 weeks off it. Kind of it is what it is.
So I'll give the bill sponsors the opportunity just to respond to that. That was purely a proposal I've suggested in terms of those dates.
Sure, I think you're being overcautious, particularly with the Irish Medium Bill.
It's been suggested before. Feels familiar.
As I've said, there's going to be a relatively small number of stakeholders coming to give evidence.
No, I
mean, there's no chance whatsoever that when the call the evidence is out, there's going to be people banging down our doors to come and give evidence.
That would be
we know who the witnesses are going to be, and there's no need to prolong this bill any longer than need be. I still think it's absolutely reasonable, and I don't think we're in any way pushing the boat out by suggesting we could have this finished by the end of June. We were able to do the uniform bill, which was much more substantive than this bill that I'm bringing forward.
Considerably more.
Yeah, and I expect there's going to be a relatively small amount of work involved in scrutiny on this bill. As I keep repeating, it's one substantive clause.
With the uniform bill, we did have until the 30th of August as the end of the committee stage, so you still had like that leeway for yourselves if something were to come up, but members really wanted to meet more often and get it done before recess. So if everyone was wanting to do that, that would that's potentially, and that's happened before. But he still did have the bit of leeway. So that's all I'm saying.
And are you saying that we could actually finish this, even if we put a date on for September, that it could be finished before June? And if that was the case,
the end of committee stage is like
a hard stop.
It's a target.
Yeah.
It's you have to stop. You have to report. You have to have your amendments ready. You can't do any more on it. You don't get an extension of that again. So that's why it can be further out than the actual completion.
I understand that, but
that okay?
Just in terms of the the procedures if we have gone through the process,
We can
we've
report
taken
back.
evidence
You've
from
done
all
everything
potential
faster,
witnesses,
then
and
you
everything
finish
is done
faster.
before the end of June, then we can say that's the end of committee stage.
Yeah, if the
Yes.
committee's
So I think
happy,
the
yeah.
earliest possible date would be once the consultation response is in. So as soon after the 15th of June, we've completed our evidence. We can bring our
Okay.
process to a conclusion. So that's certainly my understanding. I'm nothing I've suggested here is in remotely in any way a target. As I feel like we're in school uniforms all over here again. So I'm not proposing a target. If
I suppose, Chair, just a final point on this. My concern is if we set a date beyond that,
Yeah.
it does become a target, and we need to hear this about something, some other topic or issue, and there's delay in the process.
I'll make a compromise. I'll make a compromise proposal that you have referenced when you spoke to this, Eamon, that there was the 30th of August date of moving it to the end of the summer. If that gives comfort that we have built in some time for an additional meeting in the summer if there was an amendment to be discussed. But I think realistically that focuses members' minds on the 3rd of July for the Irish Medium Workforce Bill. I would be very happy to propose that. I would still be of a mind that the Holiday Hunger Bill probably does need to move into September because
That's
there was
really
I think to
look, there's-
reflect the second stage debate, there was such an emphasis placed on the need for good scrutiny, and that would be.
And I get that.
I think it's
right?
important to note.
And
we do. I think we need to bring this to a conclusion. So it's either going to be probably with witnesses waiting, so it'll be need to be to bring to
I
a
think
vote
that's
or to decide.
I think it's a fair point what you made there. The problem with the stage 2 debate was, and you've seen it when I was in last week, there will be a continuous debate around the principle of this. And that's what I'm worried about, that we end up with going round and round and round. And the point I just want to make, members, I really do want a good committee stage, because I know if I have a good committee stage, then it'll be an easier consideration stage. I get all that, right? But if it's delayed for no real reason for an extra week or two, that's the difference of maybe getting it finished a week or two later. That could be a holiday missed. And that's what's always in the back of my head. It's not about rushing this. It's just about making sure that if it's the will of the House, that we get the support out and there's no real messing about. I would ask then, if you've got a wee compromise or for Pat, could we then do something similar to mine? Does even like a week or two could make all the difference here? Could we move it even closer to the start of September rather than, to me that feels like the end of September, just even if we could go mid-September? It's only a week I'm fighting for.
Would be the 18th then, would be rather than the 25th. I mean, I'm not going to, I don't want to die in a ditch on it. I suppose it is really just for me that slack of, even from your perspective as the bill sponsor, if there were amendments that could enhance what you're trying to do and they're in the mix that,
Well, exactly.
So those are my proposals, but open to alternative proposals, but very conscious with witnesses waiting here, so.
So, Chair, I suppose we had a table there that was more or less reflective of how we might do it through consideration stage. Look, I was happy with your original proposal of taking 4 weeks off it, and I would see that as a compromise, and I'd hope people would see it as a compromise. That would be my position. Is I think you said 18 and 25. That's so.
I'm all about finding consensus here.
You would look. So I'm saying that's okay, and that's compromise for me. But if you're going to push it any further than that, because I think this is really important and it's important to get this stuff right, you'd push it to vote.
So I mean, I have no strong feelings either way. Really, I'm in the interest of finding consensus here. So I mean, for other members, if they would want to divide on that, or if the compromise of 18th and 25th is one that we can land on consensus on, with a clear statement, it's not a target.
I'm more comfortable with the 18th, if I'm being brutally honest. I know it doesn't, to me, a week could be massive and a holiday being missed, so I would never forgive myself if we miss, say, a midterm.
So I don't think we're reaching consensus here. So would that be your position, Deputy Chair? There's not consensus on that. So no. Okay. Well, I leave it for members to propose the committee stages, and it's not appropriate for me to make a formal proposal, and we can bring that to a vote if required. So,
okay.
On the Irish Medium Workforce Bill, do we have a proposal?
Can I propose that the committee stage ends on the 30th of August?
Okay. Clerk, can you take us through that? Do we have someone need a seconder for that, or we can just work on a proposal?
So the proposal is that the Irish Medium Education Workforce Plan Bill should have a committee stage that ends on the, what date again?
30th of August.
30th of August. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, if any, no.
Nope.
Okay, so
Okay, so the word that
talk us through the outcome.
that passes 3-1.
And then to invite proposals for the committee stage for the holiday education holiday meal payments bill for the end date for that.
Yeah, I propose that the committee stage would end on September 18th.
Need a second?
I'll
I'm not sure
second
the
that.
process is okay. And again, take us through that.
So the proposal is that the education holiday meal payments bill should have a committee stage ending on the 18th of September. All those in favour say aye.
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 Thank you. Contrary, if any, no.
Nope.
Thank you. And that's agreed as well. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, members. That was a lengthy discussion. I think it seems to be committee end date stages, other when it's general teaching council bill, seem to be matters of controversy
Seems easier,
on this
doesn't it?
committee. Yes,
Yeah,
just on so many levels. But no, that's grand. Thank you for members' patience going through that discussion. But look, appropriate that we land on a date that, as far as possible, attracted consensus. So the only other thing to add at this stage is just in relation to the committee bill, as a matter arising, we are going to be in a position to receive a briefing from Assembly advisors on the proposed bill to allow all pupils to wear trousers in school. Next meeting, 29th of April, so we would be in a position to hopefully be agreeing a draft bill. So.
That's the first draft of the
First
bill.
draft,
So,
so
The
yeah,
draft,
so you get to
the
discuss
draft
it.
hasn't been circulated.
The
No,
draft
that'll be
hasn't been
impacts, that'll be
circulated,
impacts for
so
next
the advisors are
Yeah.
just tick-tacking a little bit with the drafter so that they can fully advise you next week.
We will be in a position to discuss
Yeah.
that next week.
Okay.
Members up with that? Okay. So item 5's draft minutes. Members can refer to page 7 of their packs, and that's the draft minutes of the committee meeting of the 15th of April 26. Are we agreed that's a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Thank you. Okay, thank you. So item 6 is oral briefing from Department of Education officials on the emotional health and wellbeing framework. I just would ask members to note we are running behind time given the amount of agenda items that we've had to work through to get to this point. So I would just bring members' attention to the clerk's briefing note at page 20, the record of an informal briefing from Northwest Counselling at page 22, the Children and Young People's Emotional Health and Wellbeing in Education Strategy at page 25, a briefing paper from Smartphone Free Childhood at page 65, and a Department of Education briefing paper provided at page 7 of tabled papers. So first of all, if I can welcome all the witnesses here today and extend apologies for the amount of time that we have asked you to wait. We just had items at the top of the agenda that took considerably longer to work through than anticipated. So joining us here today we have Claire McClellan, Director of Raising Aspirations and Supporting Learning from the Department of Education, Glenda Davies, Pupil Support Team in the Department of Education, and Nicola Topping, Assistant Senior Education Officer in the Pupil Wellbeing Services in the Department of Education. So you're all very welcome here today. So I will open up this agenda item to invite opening remarks or presentation of up to 10 minutes, and then we'll move into question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to update the committee on the Children and Young People's Emotional Health and Wellbeing in Education Framework. As you mentioned, I'm joined today by Glenda Davies, who's our Head of Pupil Support Team in the Department, and Nicola Topping, who is our Head of Pupil Wellbeing Services in the Education Authority. As the committee will be aware, the Emotional Health and Wellbeing in Education Framework is a joint policy framework between the Department of Education and the Department of Health. It was launched in February 2021 following extensive engagement with schools, statutory agencies, the voluntary and community sector, parents, carers and children and young people themselves. The framework provides clear, evidence-informed guidance for those working in education on how best to promote emotional wellbeing, build resilience and support children and young people at the earliest opportunity. The evidence underpinning the framework highlighted 2 key issues. Firstly, schools were seeking greater clarity and consistency on how to support emotional wellbeing and how best to work alongside other services. Secondly, it confirmed that schools are uniquely placed to deliver universal preventative approaches that build resilience early, improve engagement and learning and reduce escalation to more intensive interventions. As a result, the framework deliberately prioritises a whole school preventative approach embedded in daily practice, leadership, culture and relationships, rather than reliance on standalone interventions. While emotional wellbeing is addressed within the statutory curriculum, the framework itself is non-statutory and schools are not required to participate in the associated projects. Despite this, the engagement across the system remains strong, with around half of all schools engaged in at least one framework project in the last academic year. Being Well Doing Well, one of our core programmes, now supports over 400 schools, with approximately 150 new schools joining each year. Health-led emotional wellbeing teams in schools are on track to engage with all primary schools by the end of the next academic year. This level of voluntary engagement reflects the value schools see in the framework as a practical guide for action. The framework and associated projects are structured around a 3-tier model, emphasising a continuum support with a strong focus and value on promotion, prevention and early intervention. The framework was published alongside an implementation plan. The briefing paper provided to the committee includes a copy of this, designed to test and establish programmes in response to an identified need or evidence gaps. All of the actions within the plan are either complete or progressing. Since 2021, DE and the Department of Health have jointly invested $21.6 million in children and young people's emotional health and wellbeing. $17.7 million of that is from the Department of Education and $3.9 million from the Department of Health. This investment has been maintained during a period of exceptional financial pressure. In 2025-26, the Minister protected $4.1 million of education funding for the framework, alongside $1.5 million which we received from Health. In parallel, DE continues to invest in complementary provision, including nurture, curriculum resources and workforce development, while the Education Authority through the Block Grant funds post-primary counselling through the HOPE service and a range of other programmes. I'd like to take the opportunity to highlight a few key areas of progress since we last updated the committee. Strategic collaboration has been strengthened between DE, DOH, the Public Health Agency, the Education Authority and the Mental Health Champions Office. In response to feedback, DE has introduced a structured annual communications approach issued at the start of each academic year. This serves to clarify the purpose of the framework, reinforces the whole school model and improves signposting to available support. Projects within the framework have been actively reviewed, refined or concluded where impact could not be demonstrated or where delivery was better located elsewhere in the system. This reflects a strong focus on value for money, sustainability and impact at scale. Wellbeing is now also clearly embedded within ETI's Empowering Improvement Inspection Framework launched in September 2024. In addition, DE commissioned ETI work has helped translate the framework into practical evidence-based approaches for schools, reinforcing that emotional health is a core feature of school culture and leadership. Emotional wellbeing has also been prioritised within the North-South Ministerial Council Education Working Group, with a shared learning event held in October 2025. This strengthened policy and operational learning across education and health systems. The committee has also consistently raised the issue of support for primary aged children, and I want to address this directly. The Healthy Happy Minds primary counselling project was time limited and funded through COVID-19 monies. This ended in March 2023. And whilst the feedback was positive in terms of delivery, the evaluation did not assess the clinical effectiveness or appropriateness of counselling models for younger children. This leaves an evidence gap around both the level of need and the most effective form of support for primary age pupils. And the Mental Health Champion has also highlighted that play-based and family-based interventions may be more appropriate for this age group. I recognise that there are ongoing calls for a primary counselling service. However, the role of education in providing therapeutic mental health interventions is not clear, and specialist mental health services for children and young people may sit more appropriately within the health system. Where families and carers do have concern about a child's mental health, they should seek advice in the first instance from their GP, who can assess the need and make appropriate referrals into the health system. The recent strategic review of the framework considered this issue and will inform the next steps, and we will work closely with health colleagues to ensure future approaches are evidence-based, preventative and focused on early intervention, with specialist therapeutic services sitting appropriate within the correct system. Turning back to the framework itself, as the framework has reached its 5th year, DE commissioned innovation and consultancy services to undertake a strategic review. That review has been wide-ranging, drawing on engagement with schools and delivery partners, analysis of project delivery experiences, and assessment of the alignment within the current health and education context. We await the final report. However, early findings are positive, confirming that the framework remains fundamentally sound and provides a coherent structure for action. However, the recent review also highlights the need to refresh the framework document to reflect the current policy context, emerging evidence and some of the realities facing our schools today. Subject to ministerial agreement, the findings will inform a new action plan to replace the original implementation plan with a stronger focus on impact, coherence and sustainability. Children and young people's emotional health and wellbeing is not delivered by this framework alone. Transform Ed positions emotional health and wellbeing as a core enabler of learning and inclusion to be embedded in school culture, leadership and everyday practice rather than delivered as a standalone activity. School leaders, teachers and the wider education workforce continue to go above and beyond, but it's important to be clear that they cannot and should not be expected to replace targeted or specialist support. Maintaining clear professional boundaries is essential for both pupil safety and staff wellbeing, and this underlines the importance of effective partnership working between education and health. The framework plays a key role in bringing coherence to this work by providing schools with a clear evidence-based structure for promoting emotional health and wellbeing and creating consistent, inclusive and supportive environments for pupils. As we look ahead, future investment decisions will be informed by learning from our delivery to date and considered carefully within the context of the wider financial position to ensure that resources are directly directed where they can have the greatest impact. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and you got through a lot of material quickly there, so given the timescales we are on, that is appreciated. I wanted to ask about the primary school sort of mental health intervention, and I'm sort of reluctant to use the term counselling service because I understand there's a range of views about what an appropriate intervention would look like, and there was a big focus in your evidence around the need to work with health. But I felt on this issue there was a sense of this is very much a health issue, and it's perhaps a pushback that's not appropriate for education to be delivering on this. And there was a suggestion that if parents are concerned about a child's mental health, they should be engaging with their GP, and of course that's appropriate advice. But given that what we hear from parents and in terms of beyond just anecdotal, in terms of the waiting list data, there aren't well developed in most areas community mental health services for children. And that the CAM service that exists is a service that clearly is under severe pressure with very, very long waiting lists and often a high threshold for a referral for those children or young people experiencing the most severe levels of mental health difficulties. So is this not an opportunity in this space where health and education can work together and deliver an appropriate intervention, whatever that might look like? Saving the service money in terms of CAMS and addressing some of those issues with a lot of discussion around attendance. If we can deal with some of these lower level anxiety issues earlier to maybe deal with some of those issues before they become a chronic problem.
Absolutely, and that's the discussion that education, the Department of Education, the Department of Health need to have around, what is appropriate, what is the appropriate support for children and young people of primary age. A number of schools do use their budgets and do invest in counselling services within their school. They also invest in a range of other early intervention programmes, in terms of focusing very much on resilience, building resilience in children and young people as well. But that wider conversation, and that's one we're intending to have and have begun with health, is really about how can we work collectively together to address some of those issues. And certainly it would be our view that if you can address some of those issues early on at that primary age, certainly it should help on down the line where and reduce the need for, I suppose, more intensive services. So that's the conversation that we need to be having with health on the back of the pilot and on the back of the review that we've just completed.
When will we see some proposals around that of what that potential service might look like?
So of course that will be subject obviously to both ministers agreeing what that might look like, and it will also be subject to budget availability. But as I mentioned, the review of the review of Healthy Happy Minds was completed a number of years ago. The review of the framework is just being finalised. So in the next number of weeks and months, we'll have those discussions with health, and after that, I suppose it will very much depend on the ministers and available budgets.
And can I be clear though, what I'm hearing, that from the Department of Education's perspective, there is a need for a joint health and education intervention in terms of primary school mental health and wellbeing?
I think it's probably fair to say that there's a clear need in terms of support for children and young people in primary school. The bit that we need to determine is what that might actually look like. And
I suppose my question was
delivered.
different. I understand that there is need for work in terms of what it looks like, and I speak to lots of different principals, and they deliver different types of interventions, and that's that flexibility can be a good thing, but it's also very budget dependent at local school level. So I suppose my question was: is there an agreement, an acceptance that there is a need for a joint education and health programme and response to support primary school mental health and wellbeing?
Well, there's certainly a need for a discussion between both departments as to what that might look like.
My position would be I think there's need for more than a discussion. I think from speaking to school leaders at primary level and post-primary as well, but we're speaking about primary schools here, they really do share that very regularly as one of the biggest challenges they face, and they see that as an issue that's really rising in prevalence, and it feeds into the attendance challenges. So I would certainly want to put in record that I think we're past the need for discussion, and I think it's about what are we actually going to deliver between health and education together. I'll potentially suggest that might be an action outworking from this. I have just one other question, and it really is in terms of engagement with young people around this. So this is obviously impacting children and young people directly where they're at. What level of engagement does the department have with children and young people around what appropriate mental health wellbeing interventions and responses and approaches are beneficial for them?
So we have, I suppose, throughout the lifetime of the framework, had a range of engagement with children and young people. Obviously, their feedback and their views informed the actual framework. But through, for example, our RAISE engagement, emotional health and wellbeing has been one of our core themes. We have had a number of sessions over the past number of years with organisations such as NICI, organisations such as a range of youth organisations taking on board their children and young people's views. And we've also done a piece of work engaging through the education authorities networks and through the youth service to make sure that all of the children and young people's views are taken into account as well. In terms of
the enhanced model that you're looking at, the enhancing of the framework, will there be new fresh engagement with young people?
Absolutely, absolutely. So once we have that review, once we have, I suppose, penciled out the direction of travel, engagement with children and young people will form a core part of that. In terms of some of our existing projects, and Nicola might want to say a wee bit about Being Well, Doing Well, some of the products and I think the little books that have been developed based on some of the feedback from children and young people as well. So
yeah,
do you want to say a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose Being Well, Doing Well sits within the framework under Wellbeing for All and is our whole school approach to emotional health and wellbeing. We're in third year of implementation. I think it's 438 schools that we're currently working, which inevitably means an impact on over 140,000 children. But a key part of the whole school approach is to audit what you're doing in your school and seek the views of children and young people. So every school that we're involved with, we are asking children and young people about their understanding of emotional health and wellbeing in a school. We've also created a number of resources. Claire references our Little Book series, and we have actively engaged with children of all ages, particularly because they are for primary and post-primary. So we've been in primary schools and we've engaged with them, but we're very much using children's views both in relation to our resources and also action planning with schools in relation how they want to take forward emotional health and wellbeing. And we also engage with parents and governors and all of those groups to try and make it real and relevant in each individual school.
Thank you. Okay, no further questions from me at this stage. I'll bring in the Deputy Chair and then if other members want to indicate.
Thanks, Chair. Good to see you again, Claire. So is the emotional health and wellbeing framework working?
So in terms of the effectiveness of the framework and the individual projects, our project leads monitor and measure and evaluate throughout the year. They have an outcomes-based approach. They present a report at the end of each year. So each of those individual projects are working really well. There's really positive feedback in terms of engagement, particularly from Being Well, Doing Well, and that's our whole school piece. That's where we're working on that whole school approach. REACH, which is working with children and young people, and the emotional wellbeing teams in schools. they get the emotional wellbeing teams in schools in particular, because it's a health-led project where health professionals are going into schools and it's complementary to being well, doing well. That gets a lot of positive feedback. I think it just really assists schools in understanding the pathways and understanding, what they can do to support their children and young people and how they can engage with that health element of emotional health and wellbeing. So
I suppose the reason
yes.
I'm asking you that, Claire, is because the data from the trusts show that there's actually an increase in demand for CAM services in some trust areas, that there has been no reduction overall in the number of children who are seeking support from CAMs. So that would suggest to me that the framework actually isn't working, because if it was working, you would see a reduction, or you would hope to see a reduction in the number of children having to access CAMs.
So I think there's a couple of things at play there. First of all, the context in which we're operating in, and the context continually changes. We know that the impacts on children's emotional health and wellbeing continue to be greater, etc. So I don't think it's comparable to say that the framework's not working because CAMs waiting lists are increasing. There's other pressures on the health system, etc., etc. From our evidence, the individual programmes are really effective in terms of supporting schools, supporting children and young people. And what we would expect to see over a longer term is that if we are doing this right, and as I mentioned, we have done the review, we'll look at a new action plan. If we're doing this right, you should see a reduction later on, that early intervention and prevention piece. You should see a reduction in the need for those more intensive services. This is early days in terms of the emotional health and wellbeing framework, but as I say, the projects that are in play are effective. Where there are projects that haven't been effective or haven't been scalable, we have concluded those and we've evaluated those. But there's so many things at play there that are impacting the numbers.
I suppose we're talking about primary level here, and when any sort of need is identified, can children quickly access some sort of therapeutic support? How quickly does that happen when a need is identified?
So I can't speak for the Department of Health where there's a need for therapeutic support. So if a child is identified...
No, but if the need is identified in the school,
so
how long does it take for some sort of therapeutic intervention? Because, if it doesn't happen quickly, there's little point in talking about early intervention.
So if a need is identified in a school that a child needs some therapeutic intervention, typically that would go through, the referral process would be through the health system. Okay? And in terms of the health piece, I can't speak for health. However, if there is a need, a child in terms of a child in a school, there are certain things that a school can help with as well. So for example, nurture. For example, some of the work through being well, doing well, can support teachers to support that child in the interim. But if a child needs a therapeutic intervention, that is in that health space, and that is where a child should be seeing the GP.
I suppose if it's a therapeutic intervention that requires the health department to become involved, if they're not getting that help or that intervention from health isn't there, then that is problematic in itself. And it comes back to the question the chair was asking you about the collaboration between education and health. And we saw that recently, I'm sure you're aware, in relation to the summer schools for the summer schemes for special schools, that there was no collaboration whatsoever between the two ministers. When either of them could have picked up the phone and tried to sort that particular issue out. It seems to be that, collaboration between the education department and the health department is almost non-existent. And unless and until both departments are cooperating and collaborating together, issues like this, where interventions are needed with children, for children who have mental health issues, then, you're never going to be able to point to success with any of these frameworks. Would you not agree with that?
Just brief response to that, and then we'll move on.
Certainly, so first of all, as I mentioned in my opening statement, that professional boundaries piece is really important, and it's really important in terms of our teachers and our health professionals, but certainly in this area, our engagement with health is strong. This is a joint health and education framework. We have a joint programme board that oversees all of the projects, and we have an operational group which Nicola chairs that bring both departments and the operational arms together. So certainly in this area...
You weren't able to tell me, Claire, how long it would take for any sort of health intervention when a need was identified?
In terms of a child going through, it very much depends what that need is, where they need to go in the system. If it is a health intervention, the correct pathway is for that child to be involved with their GP and to move on from there. But
that's how you identify whether there's collaboration and cooperation between education and health. The education, the teachers, the school identifies a need. It's then handed over to health. If there isn't any movement, if you're hitting a brick wall there in terms of ensuring that there's quick intervention for a child who needs it, then the system isn't working, and that's my point. And if education is just sitting back and saying, well, it's not our problem, that's a health issue, they can deal with it, then it's never going to work.
That's certainly not the case, and we do work closely with health in this space.
Well, there's no evidence that you're working closely together.
I'll have to draw a line on that one. Danny, you'd indicated next.
Thank you, Chair. Claire, team, thank yous. Can I just start with Being Well and Doing Well programme? Is all the staff on protected notice?
No. Nicola, do you want to pick that up?
No, the staff are not on protected notice at this point.
None of them? You're on
In
that?
Being Well, Doing Well?
Yeah.
No, they're not.
My understanding that there's up to 20 staff working on that programme would be on protective notice. Some of them would be teachers.
No, at this point there has been discussion in relation to funding and budgets at this point, and they have been told about that, but they have not been put into a formal process of protected notice. But in the interest,
They have been told that they
have
may not be there after
They
June.
have been told that in terms with the Department of Education letter that came to us, the parameters around that in relation to funding, but they have not been placed on protective notice at this point.
Okay, so
But yes, they are aware. They are absolutely
there's no danger
aware.
of job loss. I was thinking of people coming from the youth side of that there, because you mentioned REACH as well, because I know we're restructuring. REACH programme is no longer going to exist. They're being restructured.
So I'll pick up first of all on the wider budget.
I genuinely don't need the wider budget stuff. I just want to know, because my real question was going to come out of that was, if that was the case, is there guarantees being given to those staff also that maybe who are teachers on secondment, that if this were to end in June, that there's someone picking up their wages by the time they go back into their school in September, that no one's left supported? That's the guarantee I'm just looking from this.
So in terms of the budget position for all of our earmarked funds, what the Minister has put in place in the absence of an agreed executive budget is an interim budget, and we've notified all of our Education Authority partners that there is budget cover at the same level as last year available from April to June, and we'll keep that under review.
But my point was around a teacher, if you're seconded from June and that ends then, because I'm picking up a wee between the lines that there is a wee danger of this. So if that was June and this doesn't happen and the programme ends, then they go back to school in September. So is the department going to make sure that they have their wages over the summer?
So post June, in advance of June, we will have discussions with Being Well, Doing Well. The challenge here is in the absence of an agreed budget from the Department of Finance.
So something that's really working.
To that.
There's a chance that people can either.
We will do what we
lose
can
their
to
jobs.
make sure that's not the case. But
I
unfortunately,
want
because
that
we don't have
a wee
that
bit of
budget
clarity,
certainty.
because when we talk about emotional health and well-being, and particularly for myself, what keeps me awake at night is how children with additional needs are spoken about and how they're then treated. And look, I'm going to just be honest, like when parents see the DUP arm in arm with parties like Reform UK, those politicians mock children with autism. Their deputy leader has said that it is insane that children would have ear defenders on in a school setting, that children with additional needs are being overdiagnosed. This is something that we're starting to hear come out from other people in quarters closer to home. And I care about children everywhere. So I think those are very dangerous rhetoric that is coming from across the water. And can you understand why parents would be concerned at the possible direction that the DEP Education Minister is taking our education system, particularly when you see that report, and a very damning report that came from the Children's Law Centre today about the possibility of children's rights even being impeded here?
So certainly in terms of emotional health and wellbeing, I think in terms of the investment that the Minister has committed into emotional health and wellbeing demonstrates that his and the Department's commitment in this area. As I said, last year, despite the financial pressures, the Minister still invested the 4.1 million along with the 1.5 million of health, and he has made clear both, I think, back in February in the Assembly, in terms of emotional health and wellbeing,
he is a member of a party that is bringing these types of politicians to these shores, and they're over doing electioneering from across the water. So you could understand why parents are deeply concerned with the direction of travel that this minister may possibly go.
I can't comment on that.
I wasn't expecting it, so thank you.
Thank you. Danny, Michelle, you'd indicated next.
Thanks very much, folks. A lot of ground actually been covered that I was going to talk about, but I wanted to ask about just the connection between health and wellbeing and bullying in schools. I just spoke with the team recently, the bullying team, and I have an interest in it, so I was just wondering how there's a statutory obligation, I guess, for schools in terms of bullying, and how does this framework actually interact with that and help the kids who are experiencing bullying in terms of what's on offer to them in terms of interventions? Is there anything specific around bullying, and are you measuring any of the impacts of bullying on health and wellbeing in schools that then might feed into the refresh framework?
So first of all, in terms of the bullying piece, and I might actually get Nicola to come in a second, just in terms of how her services connect in with the other EA services, because really it should be a continuum of support. Really being well, doing well should be setting the foundations within a school, and it should be supporting teachers in terms of that well-being piece, supporting pupils, and those other services should be coming in and wrapping around where there are particular issues. And in terms of bullying, and particularly the Addressing Bullying in Schools team, I know where there's an incident, they will work with the school, but they will also draw in other services. So that does happen, and that is, I suppose, a matter.
Those links being measured specifically on bullying.
So in terms of measuring, you're aware of the position in terms of schools recording bullying. The department doesn't collect any data at the present time in terms of the impact of bullying on emotional health and wellbeing, but certainly that's something, as we are working through the bullying data and how we collect that with the new EDIS systems, it's something we can consider. Yes. But certainly in terms of your point around the bullying and the link with emotional health and wellbeing, those teams are connected and do talk to each other. So where a child is experiencing bullying or where a school needs support, they should be accessing, and they do access, all of those education authority services. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, Shirley, I concur with what Claire's saying. I mean, the bullying team and the services that I'm here representing all sit within in one part of the authority. And certainly, yes, the being well, doing well piece is always designed to be a foundational piece to create a culture that is welcoming, that is inclusive, and allow schools to identify what their particular needs are. And then our team can, and their dedicated officer can work alongside them on a range of issues, but then also be able to signpost them to, for example, the likes of the anti-bullying team. So that work is ongoing. We also then have services, certainly within the Education Welfare Service Transformation, our restorative practice practitioners, our emotional and mental health teams. So there is a lot of work going on that is either about creating a positive culture and ethos in a school, right the way through to maybe more individualised and specialised work. We also have, particularly in post-primary, we also have our HOPE, Holistic Options Promoting Resilience, the counselling service. So any child that does feel that they need to specifically avail of a therapeutic intervention can do so. But there are a number of services within that sort of pupil wellbeing and protection umbrella that do work together to support both schools and children directly, yes.
I just hope there's that recognition that bullying is something that really originates in schools, often is happening in schools, and when you're looking at the different services, that if the emphasis within that the legislation and what that team are doing is preventative, then of course that's a value to that in terms of then what you're trying to achieve, that you're maybe reducing the number of people who are coming through. So it'd be good to see that there's some kind of understanding of just how much bullying is generating the kind of interventions that you're delivering, because I think it's important if though that team's enabled to do the preventative work, that there's obviously a linkage there that especially within a school setting when the bullying's happening in school. The only thing I also wanted to ask that caught my eye was just around the review, and the ICS is expected to look at that and give recommendations. It said recommendations focus on strengthening and clarifying the role of the framework document. Were there any specific gaps or weaknesses that were identified then that they're looking to address within the new framework?
So as I said, we haven't got the final report yet, but one of the things I suppose that we're keen to do is make sure we obviously take on board the learning from the previous, and that'll build the next iteration. One of the areas I did mention earlier is the primary piece, and there was, I think it's probably fair to say there has been quite a bit of discussion, but there's no real clear agreement in terms of what that should look like. I think it's just an acknowledgement that that's an area that needs more discussion. But as I said, we haven't got the final report. We're expecting that imminently. Yeah. And we will read that really carefully, but we'll also take into consideration there's a range of other reports. For example, tomorrow there's 3 events, emotional health and wellbeing events we're attending. There's a lot of work going on in health, so we, in terms of the mental health the strategy, etc. So alongside that report, alongside the management information and data we have from those individual projects, and the other stuff, that's what will inform the next steps.
Yeah, I think I probably just reinforce what people have already said about the primary school level. And I think with all of this, it's where you can be preventative and early intervention. Same with the bullying. If you're getting in and dealing with those issues before they escalate, then it's going to reduce pressure, hopefully. There'll always be a need for this kind of wellbeing support, and it's good to see the positives that are here. But I hope this just doesn't become, we don't look at it holistically when we're analysing where the resources go. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Michelle. Cara, you indicated.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to the panel for your answers so far. On Friday, I recently had a meeting with Assert to learn more about their SHIP programme. And basically, they're helping young people who are experiencing self-harm and suicidal ideation. One of the things they had mentioned, their work is incredible. The results that they get in supporting our young people is amazing. But they did say a number of schools are not taking up on the opportunity to have like team sessions with multiple children all at once. There seems to be a hesitancy or a reluctance, but all the funding is there and there are slots available. Is that something you're aware of, or what can we do there to really maximise what's out there to support our children?
I am aware of it because the therapeutic group work forms part of our contract with providers under the Hope Counselling contract. And the therapeutic group work is a new part of the contract, this current iteration. It wasn't in previous ones. And we have had some challenges getting that up and running. We have. But we have a very robust contract management arrangement with each of our providers, of which Assert is one. And we are working hard with them to get schools to. So what we have found is in year one, there was some take up. We're having more take up, and we're looking at different ways to promote that. The schools that are taking it up find it incredibly valuable, and I think we're trying to share the learning around that, the good practice around that. But yes, there are still some challenges with that, yes. But we're working on it, we're very aware of it. Because it is new to them. It is new to them.
It definitely seems to be a missed opportunity, just given I know the pressures with lack of investment in young people, early intervention, and we've seen the sort of trend of, it seems like a crisis management, but this is something that is readily available and isn't being taken up. So any feedback that you have in the coming months that you can give back to us as a committee would be really helpful on that point. Just moving on then, a really, quite frankly, terrifying statistic that was inside our pack was the 324% increase in suicidal ideation, particularly of young girls. Do you have any more feedback that you can tell us, any more details surrounding what is causing this? perhaps what a gender-based approach that you're offering to support young girls in school. And if you have any further data or insight into why are we seeing our young girls have this stark, scary increase in suicidal ideation in Northern Ireland?
So I'm not sure that was a statistic that the department provided.
From smartphone-free childhood.
The smartphone-free childhood report.
Okay. So that it's not a statistic the department has provided, but what I would say is, I think in terms of the increase, particularly in emotional health and wellbeing issues, particularly severe emotional health and wellbeing issues in children and young people, there are a range of factors at play here. I think, the evidence would suggest social media has an impact, the use of mobile phones has an impact, and a range of other, I suppose, societal issues as well, and not necessarily sometimes things that are happening in the schools, but much more broadly. So recognise that is an increase. We do know that there are certain areas that are a bit more significant issue for girls than boys. And certainly that is something through the training, etc., that would be that is available to schools, that would be picked up, and I suppose it's the different experiences. There's a couple of things that the department obviously has been looking at and has been put in place to try and address that. So first of all, at the most extreme end, where we are currently reviewing our Protecting Life in Schools document along with the Education Authority. That is nearly ready and will be published before the new academic year. There are the ongoing programmes within the framework, and also obviously there is the Hope Service as well. So that is the type of thing that is available, but also at an individual level, for example through the RAISE programme, where localities have identified specific issues, and we have a number of programmes that are coming through to help support schools, help support children and young people, are utilising youth work approaches as well, so youth organisations to help support both boys and girls with a range of issues. So very aware that the context and the picture is changing, very aware that there are some really startling statistics there, but it's something that we are conscious of, and as we move forward into that new iteration of the action plan, it's certainly something that we'll be taking on board to see are the current programmes targeted in the right way? Do we need to look in a different way and bring on additional programmes, etc., etc.? So really conscious of the context, but that's something we will definitely be considering as we move forward.
And just a quick follow-up then in the interest of time.
We need to be very, very brief, Cara. Just a final point, really.
No worries. I don't know, that's grand. When I was chatting with the CERT, they had said they have profound concerns about the rise of eating disorders, particularly in young women, and they feel like this is being fueled by algorithms. And just, I suppose, yes or no answer, is that something specifically the department is looking at?
So in terms of that wider piece, I think that is there's a UK-wide consultation ongoing at the minute in terms of that wider online piece. It's something that we are interested in the department, but that is it's being led at a wider UK level.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, may I just provide a reassurance to committee? I'll be very brief. It was just to maybe respond to Cara in terms of the fact that through Being Well, Doing Well, we provide suicide prevention and awareness training. Over 500 staff have received that. And we also, within the Hope Counselling contract, obviously do safety planning with children who maybe are expressing suicidal ideation. So I just wanted to provide that reassurance that we're working at both ends of that continuum.
Thank you. I think well worth noting that for the record. Yeah. Kathy, you'd indicated.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, guys, for coming in and for your presentation. Claire, just wanted to ask you about something you mentioned, professional boundaries piece. You said, in response to Pat, you said it in your opening statement. Could you just give us an outline of what that means?
So in terms of professional boundaries, please, I suppose what I'm referring to there in terms of our teachers and our schools, it's really important our teachers and our schools, and I'll let Nicola come in because this fits in with exactly what we're doing with doing well. But in terms of our teachers in our schools, our teachers and our educators are not there to act as medical professionals. They are not there to provide a diagnosis. They are not there. They are there to teach and enable our children to learn. So it's really important that there is that professional boundary in place. So where a child does have an issue that needs support, that is provided by the right person. So that is the point that I was making in terms of this piece. Schools absolutely have a key role to play, and schools have a really, really important job that they can do with that early intervention, that building resilience, that giving children and young people the skills to deal with the anxieties, things that they'll come across in life. But it's making sure that actually we're not putting on to schools and putting on to teachers something that they're not trained to do.
So just on the back of that then, can I ask, you talk to classroom assistants, and one of the first things they'll say to you is they're expected to double up as nurses. They're administering complex medical medicines, they're peg feeding children who can't toilet, things like that. So it seems a bit contradictory that we're talking about it here in health and wellbeing, but when it comes to complex medical needs of children, we're asking our classroom assistants to do it.
Certainly in terms of whoever is providing support for children and young people, and certainly I know you can pick this up with our SEN colleagues in more detail, but it's important that those individuals are appropriately trained. So no matter who they are.
The reality is that they're not, and this feels a wee bit of an excuse maybe for health not coming to the table, because it does, and I know there'll be classroom assistants who will hear this, who will probably be screaming that they're expected to do this. We've seen time and again, if we're relying on the health minister and the education minister to come together to sort this out, I really fear for where it's going. We've had the conversations many times in our special schools with no nurses on site, so those teachers are being expected to be medical professionals as well. So can you understand how it seems a wee bit contradictory that we're talking about it in this sphere, but when we talk about classroom assistants and teachers, they're expected to be medical professionals?
So absolutely, but I suppose in terms of the special educational needs piece, I know that both ministers are having discussions, and I know that the officials both in the Education Authority and in the department responsible for SEN are having those having those
and again, try not to put this
so
on you directly, but we're not seeing the evidence of that, and we're not convinced of that, and there's many of things that are happening that again are contradictory to that as well. But I want to ask you a piece, and I know we've had the conversation a few times around emotional based school non-attendance, and it just is there anything specific within this framework that you can point to that for those children specifically this is going to give maybe a bit of hope to those parents? Is there anything targeted at those children?
So in terms of emotional based school non-attendance, as you're aware, we're picking that up through the attendance strategy. The attendance strategy, we nearly have 2,000 responses to that. We're wading our way through them. So as you can imagine, there's quite a bit to get through. So, but in terms of, I suppose, sitting alongside this, and one of the key things that are in place is training. Through the Education Authority, through education psychology, to help build an understanding of what emotional based school non-attendance is, how that presents, etc., and that in turn should help where children and young people have those experiences. If teachers, school educators, etc., can recognise what that is, can understand what the appropriate approach to dealing with that is, and what some of the interventions that might work. So that's one of the key things. Once we've worked our way through the wider feedback in terms of the attendance strategy, we'll look at what other steps might be needed. And
so there could be a linkage between these two, because I think what you've said there is really important, because that is one of the main things. It's probably a lack of understanding as to why these children are facing this. It's unmet need within the school, and we hear that time and again, the disparities even within schools, within different teachers and that. So that training piece will be really important. So we'll be really keen to see how these will link together.
And that's absolutely key. And
just to briefly round off.
The framework isn't a standalone document. The attendance strategy will, it's important and it's absolutely crucial. Obviously, attendance and emotional health and wellbeing go hand in hand. the work of Education Welfare Service, the wider the RAISE programme, etc., etc. All of those need to work collectively together, and all of those should be, almost a continuum of support. So certainly when we're reviewing, we will be looking at the attendance piece. What came out of that? Is there something that needs to be reflected here? So that goes without saying that we would be considering that in both the framework and the attendance strategy.
That's great. We can say that. Thank you.
And Peter.
Thanks very much. Pardon me, Chair. Thanks very much for coming along today, ladies. I am just going to 2 short points. One is picking up where Cara left off on the mobile phones piece, and you won't have this in front of you. I'm more than happy just to read it out. This was from Smartphone Free Childhood. I wasn't on the committee when they appeared, but the information has been put into our packs. And basically it's a graph, it's a linear dose response relationship with use graph, and it shows the proportion of adolescents with depression or low psychological well-being. Essentially the graph in adolescence shows that at 0% of smartphone use for girls, it's, their propensity to depression is 12%, and that rises to 38%, 26% rise if the girls use a phone for 5 hours. And I'm aware that England yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, sort of announced that they were banning phones in schools. Do you feel, in terms of the overall strategy and the impact, particularly of mobile phones and social media has been talked about, Claire, you referenced it there. Do you feel that having phones in schools is having an impact on mental health, not just in girls, but in mental health in general?
So certainly the department's guidance recommends that, not having mobile phones in schools. The mobile phone pilot was one way of testing some of the interventions in terms of keeping mobile phones out of schools. Now, we are coming to the end of the mobile phone pilot. King's College London are evaluating that. Some of the early findings, some of the schools involved in that have certainly seen a positive difference where children and young people aren't using their phones during the day, both in terms of their emotional health and well-being, in terms of engagement. One of the comments from the schools was actually there's a really nice buzz in the school because actually rather than being on phones at lunchtime, everybody's talking to each other, they're actually engaging with each other. So there's some really positive feedback in terms of that impact. Certainly in terms of the Minister's position and the wider departmental work in terms of mobile phones, the intention would be to consider the outworkings of that and look again at the guidance. In terms of what's happening in England, there is a proposal under the Children's Wellbeing Bill to ban mobile phones in schools outright, and I know that in other jurisdictions that's something's being considered, but from our perspective at the present time, we want to see what the evidence says, and then we'll take decisions based on that on the back of the pilot.
Would it be fair to say, Claire, that the department will analyse, I know King's College is doing it for you, but the department's going to analyse the evidence that's been collected over the use yonder, I think, of the pouches, or in certain, the way that schools are preventing people from using it. Is it fair to say that the department will have a look at what the impact of that is via King's College, and then we'll come up with proposals or recommendations at the end of that process? Yeah. Is that how it works?
So the pouches, just for the record, the pouches were provided by Odyssey Education after a competitive procurement process. What we will do on the back, obviously we will have the King's College report. We are today, actually, there's a meeting with all of the schools with Odyssey Education, taking feedback from the schools on their experience. We're also considering, do we need to do, we've had a range of focus groups with children and young people with schools as well. We're looking at, is there anything additional we need to do to bring all that together? We will obviously look at that, and we will make some recommendations to the Minister in terms of potential next steps that he might want to take to strengthen the position.
Sure. Thanks very much. One other question then, just really for Nicola, picking up on the Being Well, Doing Well project, and I had a look at a couple of the videos, which are really excellent, I have to say. Really good resource. With 2 questions, you've got a tier 1 and tier 2. How do schools access that? automatically get registered with tier 1? Do they go to tier 2? Forgive me, it's not an area that I know a lot about, but it looks like a really good resource. So maybe you could just explain a wee bit more about that.
So what we have is a universal offer of training that any school can ultimately attend if they want to do so.
Okay.
Or we have schools that will sign up to the Being Well, Doing Well programme. And then within that, there are also 2 tiers of training. One is a tier 1 for our senior leaders in schools, and then a training programme for the broader staff. But what we're looking at is a universal offer that any school can access around our training, and then a specific piece where a school has signed up. So they come to awareness sessions, they have it in their school development plan, so they are prioritising it, and then they join the programme, they do the audit, etc., and they do all of that.
Okay.
Does that?
Yeah, that explains it very well. That's all I have. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Peter, and thanks to the panel for your input. There'll potentially be some follow-up actions on the back of that, but it was good to hear from you and to get the update on the framework. So thanks all.
Thank you.
Okay, so just while the witnesses are making their way out, I would definitely want to suggest an item, and obviously unless there's anything else through the clerk or other members, but I think in terms of follow-up, I think myself and a couple of other members picked up around the primary school mental health and wellbeing interventions and what, you know, the lack of a follow-up from Healthy Happy Minds. So I was a little bit concerned about the sense that we're still at discussion stage about whether an intervention is needed. I found that quite a concern in response. So I would suggest that we do write to both the Health Minister and the Education Minister and include the Health Committee in that, to just flag that concern, and that we would like, you know, some clarity from them if there is an acceptance on the need for a programme and an intervention at primary level, and when we will see some proposals on the table for that, if other members are agreed on that. Mm-hmm. Any other items that anyone wants to raise, Danny?
Yeah, just if we could get some more clarity on what I asked at the very beginning around the staff attached to that Being Well, Doing Well, because I don't know when exactly you're placed on notice, but everyone's aware of it, but you're not on notice. Like, some of these people who are staff of this are seconded from school and have been out of their schools for quite a number of years. I think this is year 3 of a 5-year programme. So what does happen if the programme does not get funded after June and then jobs? Like, who picks up their salary in that? And they did reference REACH, and I'm concerned because I have spoken to people who have worked within that programme. I know they've told me jobs have actually been lost. So not everyone could be put back into place, and there were some people who were there on temporary anyway, just specifically because it was like REACH and Fleur. So that worries me. They're coming in and champion programmes that no longer exist or may not longer exist, if you know what I mean, and I just didn't get any clarity in that in the answers.
No, I think it would be worthwhile getting clarity on the funding position and the staffing position for both REACH and the Being Well, Doing Well. So if members are agreed on that.
It's for the teachers as well, because I'm just thinking, if you've been out of your teaching job, and people know better the way the salary works, but if you've been out for 3 years and you're not going back to school to September, I'm guessing there's going to be a gap there in the summer. So just to get that clarity to make sure that them staff are protected.
Yeah. We're agreed on that. And Cara, you'd indicated there.
Yeah, I just want to add, what kind of jumped out at me there is I still feel from the department there's quite a disconnect with how bullying impacts mental health, impacts, as Kathy had said as well, emotional-based school avoidance. I feel the dots aren't being connected. It's kind of clear as day just how much stress. And I spoke with a number of families this time last year, and a large number, the main reason really was bullying and anxiety that was keeping children at home and not learning in our classrooms. So I really am not leaving today's panel really feeling as confident that they're looking into that aspect of mental health and well-being of our children. I don't know if other members share my views, but I just thought it's important to share.
Yes. Michelle, you'd raised bullying. Is that one you want to come in on?
I guess it's just that all of this is the concern that, you know, the resource allocated to things like bullying now, whether that's secure or not. And I think that linkage is actually completely vital, and it is around that preventative side, you know. And I think you can overlook the fact that bullying usually starts in school. We're talking about kids being off their phones, sitting talking. If a child's being bullied, they're just sitting there going, I wish I had my phone so I don't look so exposed, or sitting in the toilets crying their eyes out, you know. So none of these things are particularly easy, but if there was, we asked the questions whether there was any kind of measurement going on to actually assess, and I think that there isn't. So I don't know that there is a follow-up there necessarily, but
certainly noted. And again, it has been in the mix around need for a concurrent health and education meeting. Again, we're a lot of legislative pressures, but I think we should keep that under review as to whether that is one worth picking up, because it crosses over so many areas. Okay, so no further indications, so that brings that item to a close, if members are agreed. Next item in the agenda, item 7, it's the, my understanding is the final evidence session in our strategic review of the current SEN provision and transformation agenda, and it's an oral briefing from the Department of Education and Education Authority officials. So I'd refer members to the clerk's briefing note at page 117, the terms of reference for the inquiry at page 118, and the briefing paper provided by officials at page 25 of tabled papers. So joining us today, I think we maybe don't have Lorraine.
She's unavailable today.
Yeah, that's fine. So joining us today with Deirdre Ward, Director for SEN Strategic Policy in the Department of Education, and Dr. Thomas Adele, the Chief Transformation Officer in the Education Authority. So before we do anything else, apologies for the delay. We had lengthy discussions on a range of issues at the start of the agenda, which ran considerably over. So we do apologise for keeping and thank you for your patience. It's probably worth highlighting that there was a long discussion around the letter that has been issued by the Children's Law Centre and other stakeholders. And it's likely there will be questions from members in relation to that as you are here, but I think also this is a briefing that we were is a key element to our SEN inquiry around some of the early intervention and the transformation end of funding issues. So I mean, I hope we do get the opportunity to hear on that aspect of things as well. But at this stage, I'll hand over for any opening remarks, presentation, up to 10 minutes, and then we'll move into question and answer. So is it Deirdre, yourself?
Yeah, I'll start, yeah. So good afternoon, and thanks to the committee for giving us the opportunity to update you on the SEN transformation projects, which have been funded by the Public Sector Transformation Fund. So the department was successful in securing 27.5 million over 4 years for SEN transformation through the Transformation Board in March 2025. So this has allowed us to kickstart delivery of a number of priority actions within the SEN Reform Delivery Plan, and those projects are the focus of today's evidence session. So members will be aware that the Transformation Fund was initially secured to take forward 14 projects, and in December 2025 the senior responsible owner determined that a stocktake review would be helpful to ensure deliverability, cohesiveness across all the projects, and complementarity with the Education Authority's emerging enhanced support model. So implementation was therefore paused from December 2025 until April 2026. The stocktake has now been completed and a revised approach agreed by the Minister and the Programme Board. The revised approach has been submitted to the Public Sector Transformation Board, and that happened on Monday. And I'm happy to report that the Transformation Board approved the new shape of the programme on Tuesday. So to summarise the outcome of the stocktake review, it has been determined that most projects will continue, a small number will be reshaped or scaled back, and 2 projects will not proceed at this point. I'll now provide a brief overview of the revised approach. A number of priority actions within the SEN Reform Delivery Plan were selected for inclusion within the bid, which focused on early intervention, transforming the support model for children with the statement of SEN, building a skilled education workforce confident in meeting the needs of all children, and creating a more inclusive education system. Those priorities have not changed. In relation to early intervention, we have a range of test and learn projects. The suite of 5 early childhood intervention projects is proposed to be reduced to 4. Firstly, a parental support programme will be delivered to parents of young children with SEN, providing information, training and support to help them support their child's development and to establish networks of peer support. We will also introduce a SEN-specific element to the Getting Ready to Learn programme for parents of preschool children. Secondly, the 2 to 3-year-old programme for children with additional needs will continue as an extension of the former Belfast-wide Early Years project, so focusing solely on 2 to 3-year-olds and their families. The Reshape programme commenced in September and will run for 3 years.
Thirdly, a SEN support learning trial will see dedicated teachers employed to support preschool, P1 and P2 children who are pre-code or at stage 1 of the code of practice in 28 educational settings over a 2-year period, providing small group or one-to-one where necessary. This project will include funding for access to resource and therapeutic interventions. Lastly, the SEN Early Years Assistant Training Programme will offer 360 funded accredited training placements over 3 years delivered by the Further Education Regional Colleges. This project seeks to test the impact of various accredited courses on classroom practice, the confidence of classroom assistants and the outcomes for children. The project started in January and there's 114 classroom assistants have completed the first tranche of training. The 5th Early Childhood project was the establishment of early years intervention hubs. This project will not proceed at present as it was deemed undeliverable within the time frame. The other project planned to be taken forward under early intervention was a speech, language and communication intervention project, which would be led by the Education Authority, working in partnership with all 5 health trusts. Training and resources for preschools, primary and post-primary schools will be developed to support SLC development. Bespoke resources and training will be developed for the growing Irish medium education sector. The other project which will not progress is the Enhanced Nurture Support Project, and this project sought to build on the existing nurture group provision. There are issues with the financial stability of nurture groups, and while options to stabilise them have been developed, given the need to stand up projects in 2026, this project is no longer deemed deliverable within the time frame of the transformation funding. The enhanced support model for children with a statement of SEN is one of the linchpins of SEN reform, and public consultation on the proposed way forward commenced on the 24th of March, with phased implementation to commence in September 26. The committee did already receive a briefing on enhanced support model on the 18th of February, so don't intend to focus on that today. But to complement the enhanced support model and also focusing on support for children with a statement of SEN, 7 special schools will be established as resource hubs, collectively supporting 70 local mainstream schools, providing in-school training, modelling, good practice, strategies and pedagogy in a real-time responsive way. This will assess the impact of this model, which operates effectively in other European countries. Building a skilled education workforce which is confident in meeting the needs of all children underpins the SEN reform agenda, and I know from listening to previous sessions that this is also an emerging key finding from the committee's inquiry. We've linked in with Transform Ed to ensure that SEN is incorporated into their teacher professional learning framework and are working with EA colleagues to design SEN-specific training for mainstream and special schools. Fundamental to the success and long-term sustainability of the enhanced support model is investment in our classroom assistants. The Ulster University has recently been commissioned to undertake a focused piece of work that will inform the design of future employment model and career progression pathways for classroom assistants. The creation of a more inclusive education system is another underpinning principle of SEN reform, and the profile of our pupils is changing and our schools have to adapt to ensure that they support all learnings. 2 of the projects funded by the Transformation Fund focused on inclusion. The Inclusion Capacity Building Programme will start with an inclusion education symposium in September 26, delivered in partnership with Middleton Centre for Autism and involving academic experts, ETI and local schools. New resources on inclusive practice will also be developed for the teacher professional learning platform currently being commissioned by EA under Transform Ed. And finally, the Inclusive Play programme will provide a whole school intervention to embed the understanding of inclusive play, supported by our delivery partners, Playboard. The programme will be delivered to 48 settings during the lifetime of the project, and Cohort 1 is scheduled to commence in this school term. So I hope this has provided members with an overview of the current position, and we'll be happy to take questions. But first I'm going to hand over to Thomas, who has a few comments.
Yes, so I think just right to address some of the comments in the CLC letter to help us to help provide some further clarity from our perspective, which might help the questions here and going forward. So first of all, as I said, we agree with those who say that SEND delivery is not good enough. This is something we've said over and over again, and it's not because of staff or the people working in our services, it's because we don't provide the staff or the people working in the schools and education with the right tools to deliver the best outcomes for children with SEND. That's so fundamentally the starting point we don't disagree with. We agree with that. Children are not receiving their support they need when they need it. And that's not good enough. That is fundamentally the burning platform of change. The enhanced support model looks to address that. Before I made a couple of comments about enhanced support model, I just want to say one thing as well, that we are addressing many other things as well. So for example, the digitization of the statutory assessment system is providing significantly better services already. Currently, the average waiting time for statutory assessment process is 24 weeks, with a target of 26 weeks. On Friday afternoon, there were 30 cases waiting more than 26 weeks, and we get 500-600 applications every month. In the new system, we issued the first 4 statements at 11 weeks and 12 weeks after receiving a referral. That is significant improvement on previous years. So there are things happening. Transformation is having a positive impact when we do it right. So the enhanced support model, it's important to say what the enhanced support model is and what it isn't. It is not changing the legal framework. It is not changing the legal protection of children and young people with SEND. It does not change the statutory assessment process. Referrals come as they come before. People can make a referral in the same way. The assessments, advices in the statements do not change, and the outcomes in terms that there will be a specified and quantified outcome in the current legal framework does not change. The right to appeal to tribunal does not change. Those protections for parents and children remains the same. What changes is the delivery of services on the front line, so to speak. The CLC letter addresses 5 issues: capacity in schools, capacity in EA and LETs, the lack of cooperation between different delivery actors, refusals of applications and then the tribunal on that, and the failure to provide specific SEND provisions. Apart from the tribunal bit, which I think is separate from the other ones, we agree with those 4 points. That are fundamentally the core failures of the SEND delivery system. And that is what we want to address with the enhanced support model. We want to enhance capacity in the education sector. We want to enhance capacity in stage 2 services to provide better services earlier on. We want to provide that the education schools have a much better support in the first place to deliver the support they needed in a sustainable way to the children when they need it. We want to address the lack of cooperation between support sectors. So we want to have healthcare at the table delivering in schools. And we want that the statement specifically addresses the SEND provisions that would help that child. That is not a generic statement, that a statement says this child has have these needs, therefore they will receive this support. That is the fundamental principles of the enhanced support model. So we don't actually think we're that far off what CLC and others are asking for. We also want to say that the enhanced support model does not shift legal duties from EA onto schools. The legal duties in terms of SEND delivery remains with EA. There's no shifting. We're not delegating duties to anyone else. That remains with us, the way it is now. The enhanced support model does focus on the need of children, though. So the starting point is children. How do we support individual children to provide the best outcomes in an education setting? That is the core foundation. That's why we have a public consultation ongoing at the moment. Basically, what will things look like for the child? It's absolutely right that we have that consultation, and it's right that we hear views on that. When we know what people have said to us, when we have analyzed those responses, that's where we take the next steps in deciding what we actually will do. On Friday, we had about just under 2,000 responses so far in that application. That's very, very encouraging. That means people are engaging and want to speak. We have engagement event ongoing this week and next week and a few weeks going forward, where we have a significant sign-up. There's good engagement, there's good discussions. And there are many comments on how we should do things differently. We don't have a preset agenda. We want to listen and hear how we can deliver better services. That's the purpose of the public consultation. When we finish public consultation, we will analyze responses and see how we best support children and young people with SEND. At that point, it's right to work with staff on how we change employment models for staff, if that's warranted. We have, as we said on record in here many times, we want to improve the role of the classroom assistants. We want to create career pathways, development opportunities, and reward for the work they do. The work classroom assistants is invaluable. That's we remain that. I said it before, and I'll say it again. That's not a question for us. How we do that depends on the model to support children and young people. We need to get an idea what the model should look like. Then we work on details on staff contracts, for example. We will of course engage with anyone who wants to engage with us. And I'm happy to take any questions on that or anything else as part of transformation today. Thank you.
Thank you, and appreciate that some of the issues around the law centre correspondence were addressed, and that as well as the scheduled briefing. I'm probably going to try and attempt the impossible and try and cover both, but they're not disconnected either. So I think that is worth reflecting on. I just wanted to sort of highlight, I'll put a few initial reflections and then see how you might respond. So I was at the event on Thursday, was on a panel with you, Thomas, and had lots of conversations. And that was at that consultation event with lots of stakeholders from the system there. And my takeaway from that was that almost in equal measure, there was substantial openness to reform and change, and I think it's important to be fair on that. There were lots of voices saying we know there is a need for change, this system is not working, and lots of great examples of good practice that is working really well. So I want to be fair on that, but I think that is almost equally balanced with a huge amount of fear and anxiety about what is coming, and teachers in particular saying they really do feel overwhelmed, and I think particularly that came through from the primary sector. That sense that they feel that there's maybe more flexibility and scope available at post-primary for some of these different models, but often, P1, P2 kids coming in with really complex needs and they're just saying we just need help. I think that's trying to balance those two things. So I put that down as a note at the start. I wanted to get a sense then on that basis, because a lot of what you've said, Thomas, I imagine, could be very reassuring to people listening to say that there is no set agenda, you're in listening mode, consultation is live. The concerns that I was hearing in a number of conversations were that there is still a September start date being flagged, and that goes hand in hand with new SEN regulations coming through committee. And I know there's the department had said when initially presenting them, keen to see that ready to go for September. So it's just how do we marry that we're in listening mode, we're working on a new model, we'll engage, but we've got a September start date. Is there anything you can say to that just to understand, well, what does what's kicking off in September look like if we're really quite far away from being clear on what a new model looks like?
Well, I'll start, and I'm sure Thomas will come in. They're already, and you heard some of those give the examples of different practice that they're already delivering on. I myself thought the impact that the parents' stories made on how things were better for their children, ultimate models of support. Maybe did we miss the opportunity to have a primary school who are doing alternate models of support there? Yep, and that's something we'll learn from as we're moving forward in communicating. But it was an opening discussion around what does it look like. So for September, there are already 150-ish schools doing something different. It's working with those schools to understand the outcomes that they're getting and really understand what it is that they're doing differently that is working really well, so that we can disseminate that to others for them to think about it.
And I ask, and I don't want to cut across you because I'm just really conscious of time, and that's entirely our doing and not yours. In terms of that, for anyone listening to this conversation, can I then check for clarity? Yeah. When you're saying a September start date, is that what you're referring to, or are teachers system-wide going to see when they arrive at their class on the 1st of September that this is going to be new code of practice, new model of support, new ways of working that they currently don't know what they look like?
No. So the September start date that we have proposed, again, which is proposed, is the start of implementation, not finished product. That's when we're starting to work on the details on implementation. But for example, take the primary school sector. I had one primary school teacher approach me after the event on Thursday, who was really keen in a rural, small primary school with a fairly small number of children and a small number of children with statements. They can't recruit. They find it difficult for people who are not permanent because it's hard to recruit into rural areas. They wanted to do radical different things in employing one extra teacher in addition to the classroom assistant provided support, because you can't remove those in that school because of what the support they have, to provide support for other teachers and support specific intervention for specific children within the remit of the school leadership. That is exactly in line with the enhanced support model. Enhanced support model allows that flexibility to create different ways of working in different settings. First Number Start Date allows us to start that journey with those schools that are coming to us saying, we want to do this now. It won't force the change on people on the 1st September. It starts the discussion and starts those that want to start now. I mean, I can't imagine that anyone in that rural community or those parents or teachers would have an issue with a specialist teacher coming in, an additional member of staff, to provide the children to help them in those class sizes in the first place. That's purely a good thing. The enhanced support model allows us to make those changes, where the current system doesn't give us the flexibility, freedom through it.
And that may provide some reassurance to people. I'll ask one other question, because I am conscious members will want to come in, and it is just around the sequencing, and it really reflects your initial evidence, Deirdre, around all of those pilot programmes and the plans around that, those early intervention measures that you're looking at. Can I just ask around the sequencing of this, and this is something that I genuinely struggle to get my head around. Everything in the early intervention space seems to be very much in the space of development and pilots and testing and gathering evidence. And I accept a good evidence base as a good starting point for everything. But in terms of the really, really meaningful, significant interventions we've got, they've gone right in and start. It's the let's straight in with a new model, new system, whole new process for how that support pre-statement is provided. And I think we need to be honest, there are real concerns about the resourcing of those LITs, the staff complement of those LITs, the availability of a workforce to provide the specialist input, the input of health into those LITs, and the level of bureaucracy and admin that is associated with them, and the workload associated with SENCOs. We know those issues, they're well rehearsed, but we've gone straight in at that level, and then we're looking at what happens after a statement as the next action. All the stuff that's upstream that would hopefully help us get a pipeline of children coming into the system who've been identified early as having additional needs and got the support they need. That's all happening at some other time. It doesn't seem to be that we're there yet. So why has it been sequenced in that way when everything I've ever heard about SEN and SEN reform and the need for change is early intervention, until it's almost become a cliche? Why are we doing it in this order?
So, when it comes to early intervention, I think there's two kinds of early intervention. I think both are very important. One is early intervention in terms of early intervention in the code, so stage 1. Early intervention in terms of age is equally important. So that children who have a quite significant SEN need, so provide early intervention quicker rather than at the stage. LITs can provide that when it's working well. Children who receive LIT support have good outcomes. It's a capacity issue. The removing of the gatekeeping functions and the artificial numbers schools could refer to LITs have exposed a huge demand capacity gap. That was much bigger than we thought. I mean, we expected a gap, but it's much bigger than we thought. We have thousands of children waiting for LIT services. The problem for that is that a failure of LIT service? Or is it a failure of us not providing capacity for LIT teams to do their job? But it's a failure over many, many years not to invest in stage 2 services. Now we know that it's needed. We know evidence and much better how it's needed and provided. That is something we absolutely must address.
Is that investment going to come? Because your colleague Dale Hanna sat here a number of months ago and really said, once we open the door to this, we expect there will be a massive flow of referrals coming in here, and it will highlight exactly how big the demand is. He's been proved to be correct, but the next bit is, well, if we now know the level of demand, will the resource come in to do that? Because if we're going to deliver reform but just resource half of what we want to do, it doesn't feel to me that we're setting it up to succeed.
And then, Deirdre can comment on some of those things, but the hand I'm played with in EA is to provide the best service with the funding we have, right? So currently, we had discussion here in the autumn about value for money, right? Currently, I'm not assured about value for money, because how we're providing support does not use the resource we have best. So we must ensure that the funding we have is delivered best. And then we also must address how much resource we allocate to SEN. They're not separate, and we shouldn't just focus on one. LITs provides a better value for money, but it's not sufficient money. if we provide an enhanced support model that's proper integrated with LITs, and have healthcare involved in all of that, the value for money benefit to all children across all stages of SEN is significant, because there will be much better resource to deal with the children as they appear in school. I mean, we want to create a school that the whole school environment is much better equipped. That allows, we talked this before, it allows providing admin resource for schools to release the Senkos to do education work, because that's what their skills are, right? Currently, we have to overload with classroom assistants that are often short-term nature so that Senko can do paperwork. Financially, that makes no sense. It makes far more sense to remove paperwork from Senko, release Senko through educational intervention in SEN, which they are the expert for. Right? That's what they should be doing, and have others doing paperwork. But that requires us to think differently than how we plan the whole model. In the current system, we don't have the freedom to do it. An enhanced support model and different lit services allows us that process to change that. I mean, if you, looking across all parts of this room, gave me significantly more money, I might be able to do things. But in the absence of that significantly more money, we must transform the services so we can, and give us the freedoms, essentially, to allow that transformation and that targeted support to provide. And that's where we are.
I'm going to have to just draw a line because I know other members will come in and may well pick up on these issues. Deirdre, in terms of the transformation, is there any risk of loss of money?
No,
that is secured.
No, that has been secured,
that's
and
secured.
It's
that's good. That's
for
all
Thomas and I to decide how we best deploy that to support the transformation activities.
If we hadn't had sort of the other issues landing on our agenda today, that would have been my first question. So reassured to hear that, Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to both of you for coming in. We were having a discussion earlier around the statement and the letter released by the Children's Law Centre, the unions and other stakeholders as well. And I was making the point that in any issue in relation to children and children with special needs, my go-to organisation is the Children's Law Centre, and Rachel Hogan in particular. But others as well from the Children's Law Centre. In my view, they are the best organisation out there for dealing with issues around special needs. So, how did you feel this morning when you saw that letter and statement from the Children's Law Centre?
So, I worked at Children's Law Centre for more than a decade. I respect Children's Law Centre highly, and I know that they're absolutely passionate to provide outcomes for children. So I share that sentiment. I was disappointed, to be honest, because I've tried to meet with Children's Law Centre to discuss the enhanced support model and transformation for quite a long time, and we have not yet had a meeting. We have one scheduled for 11th of May. I think some of these things in the letter could be clarified by the discussion, because I think it's very well intended, and I actually agree with their analysis of the problems. I don't agree with their analysis of what the enhanced support model will do. So it doesn't change the responsibilities, for example, legal duties. And through engagement, we can clarify it quite easily, because it doesn't change legal duties. We don't delegate to schools.
Yeah, but you see, Thomas, here's the problem for me. I don't think the Children's Law Centre would have sent that letter to the Minister or released that statement without having given it a great deal of thought and having done their own due diligence. The Children's Law Centre aren't an organisation, that just does something on a whim. There has been a lot of thought put into that, without a doubt.
And what I'm saying is that I'm not disagreeing with you, but let's have a discussion, see how we can address those things. Because our aim that they address in the letter is actually the same aim as we have. We want the same outcome as they do. So if we have not either expressed ourselves well, or if we got things wrong, let's work together on how we can fix them.
That's okay. We all want the same outcome. We all want the best for all our children, those with special needs and those without special needs. Absolutely. The question is how you go about it. And what they're saying is this attempt to ram-stam this new framework through isn't working, and it's creating more problems, and that aspects of it may be unlawful. So how do you and the Education Authority deal with that, particularly given the organisation it's coming from?
So, I mean, when it comes to unlawfulness, I fundamentally disagree with their assessment, and I believe that it must...
Are you a lawyer?
I have a doctorate in human rights law, yes.
Right, okay.
Sorry, I mean, that's not my role. I'm not a lawyer in EA, but I have a doctorate in human rights. That's my background in academia. But
do you accept that there are other legal experts within the Children's Law Centre?
Yes. No, and this is what it means. So, what I want to sit down and discuss with them to see how did they. I mean, I don't understand how they got to that understanding. If I understand that, we either change because I have got something wrong. In that case, I'm happily change something. That's why we're having a public consultation. Or if they have misunderstood something, we might not express ourselves well enough. So that's. I mean, I want to work with them to understand why have they come to that outcome, so we can address that. Because my intention is not to shift the legal duties to create anything unlawful. Okay. So why? How have we got there? But that in reading the letter, I don't understand how we got to that position. And that's so. Here, I'm more than happy to speak to Children's Law Centre in private and in public to try to figure out how have we got here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the issues, and we have spoken about it here on numerous occasions, is whatever model is going to be put in place, it isn't going to work properly unless there's collaboration with the health department. It's clear, it's absolutely clear that there has only been minimal collaboration and cooperation between health and education. We witnessed it. We witnessed it recently in the debacle around the summer scheme for special schools. The two ministers couldn't lift the phone to each other. But when they did, it was sorted out in 5 minutes. Now, can you tell me what the level of collaboration is between the Education Authority and the Health Department? Can you give me chapter and verse of the contact there has been, the engagement there has been, what level that has been at, who it has been with, and what the issues were that were discussed? Can you give that to this committee?
Of course.
Over the past 2 years?
I can definitely give it since I started. After that, before that, I will have to investigate because I have contact records of everything I've done. We will have to speak to others in EA. I mean, there are members we have a number of freedom information requests on this. We're compiling this information in a clear format right now. I have no problem sharing that with this committee. Yeah. I do want to separate out a couple of things, and I have a great respect for my Department of Health colleagues, where I spent a long time in the Department of Health. There's been particular issues around nursing, and there's been particular issues with us contact about nursing in special schools and in a wider healthcare setting. Mm-hmm. That is different from engagement around allied health profession engagement in special schools and in supporting children with SAN. We are working. I met with the Chief Allied Health Profession Officer. I met with Chief Health Profession Officer my team has on a number of occasions. She spoke at our conference on Thursday last week. We have real idea of what we want to develop. So, for example, we're looking at EA funding some training places for speech and language therapy longer term, with then an agreement that there are staff who work in purely in education to help us develop the agenda and so on.
That's nothing to do with collaboration with health. I mean, if the EA is going to employ speech and language therapists, that's completely separate from collaboration.
No, but that is working together and finding the solutions to the workforce problems. I mean, this is finding models of delivery of allied health profession officers in an education setting that will meet the needs of the children in an education setting. That has been good engagement with Chief Health Profession Officer.
In terms of the Children's Services cooperation,
final remarks here.
What discussions have there been around pooling resources between health and education?
There has been discussions on that. There is ongoing engagement with both.
And what's the outcome of those discussions there, Drew? Because we can sit here and discuss all day, but if there's no outcomes, it's a waste of time.
I mean, I'm being open and honest here. There is no funding offers for any healthcare interventions in special schools or in SEN provisions. But we're trying to find how we can provide the best support, however it's funded, because I want to provide the best value for money with the money that's provided to us. And it provides the best outcome
and
for
that's
children.
Okay, but the Children's Services Cooperation Act is there for a reason. to ensure that departments cooperate together and pool resources where it's necessary, where there's a need for an input from both departments.
And there are discussions, for example, on how we will move forward some interim solutions in relation to nursing support in special schools, and we are working those through. There's, there is collaboration, and there are some innovative ideas about how we might bring that support in together between ourselves, EA, and Department of Health.
The members may pick up those issues to make sure we cover them in enough detail. Kathy, I'll bring you in next.
Thanks, Chair. Thomas, it's okay to agree with the essence of the letter and that things aren't right now. I like you come in here time and again and you put your hands up and you say that. I think where the worry is and the concern is where it's heading to and the changes that have been made. And it's okay you saying that this is where you want to get to. And it all sounds brilliant in theory, and we've said this, but it's the reality on the ground. And you're expressing your disappointment around the Children's Law Centre. Thomas, this is not the first time we've heard this. We've heard this time and again from people sitting in those seats that you're in now. We've all heard it time and again when we go and visit schools. So none of what the Children's Law Centre are saying is new. And what we're saying, and what I'll hand is, it should be Richard Pengelly and Paul Given sitting here answering these questions. So I know it's you that comes and has to take it. But how many warnings, how many times are they going to have to hear this thing time and time and time again before some sort of action is taken? And I want to raise something that you mentioned there about getting statements through quicker. And that can be seen as a positive. And I'll take that can be seen as a positive. But what's on those statements? Are those children being statemented correctly? Are they getting the support that they need out of that statement? And I want to give you an example. Just last night, I had a call around a child being placed in a mainstream school in learning support. The child is non-verbal, has extremely complex needs, and there was a multidisciplinary meeting around that child. The educational psychologist, no doubt the child needed to have SLD, serious learning difficulties. The EA also agreed the same, and the school needs assistance, it needs a classroom assistant to help that child with serious needs. After that meeting, a few days later, the EA phoned the parent and the school to say they'd had to think about it and they didn't really think in hindsight that the child is SLD, and they're going to put MLD, moderate learning difficulties. Now this is a child, when I hear the list, that I'm no expert, I don't have a degree in anything that can diagnose it, but I could see that it's serious learning difficulties. Can you tell me why that will be? I'll tell you what the suspicion is. The suspicion is that it's known that that child is not in the right place and doesn't have the support in the right place, but the child is being treated as a number on a spreadsheet, and it's get them into a place and make sure the statement says the right thing. Now that's what the suspicion is. Can you say anything that's going to change that suspicion for me, for the parents, for the school, for the child?
So honestly, I probably can't, because there's lack of trust, right? What I can tell you is that, I mean, obviously I can't comment on a particular child, and I'm not going to pretend that I can.
That's only one child.
I know
there'll be lots.
And I will say this many times before, contact us with those children and we look into it. Do we get things wrong? Yes. We get things wrong regularly. Do we have any systems in EA or any pressures from me or my senior team that children should be treated, that placement and numbers are more important than the right outcomes? Absolutely, categorically not. Right? The right placement for a child is the reason why we are in our jobs. The right support for a child, that's what we do. There is no pressure on getting numbers in place or getting placements done for numbers' sake. The only primary concern I have is the best outcome for the child. I mean,
and Thomas, I accept that from you. I do. But can you understand why there's a suspicion there that this is what's happening?
Absolutely. Here, 100%. I understand.
So can you then understand why Children's Law Centre are going, whoa, hold on a wee second, let's halt. Let's go back to the drawing board on this and let's look at it.
And absolutely. But hear what you're saying. The two things I want to say on that. First is, there are things that go wrong. And as soon as we hear about them, as soon as we know, we try to address them. We get many letters, many comments from parents where we got it right. many children, I mean, most children with SLD are placed in...
And Thomas, but what about those children who you're not getting it right?
Yeah, and we need to fix it for them. We need to fix the support for those children, right? But this is exactly why we believe the transformation is required. If we keep on doing the same thing, we will fundamentally get the same results.
But these new changes that are coming in, because you were saying yourself about the statement process, that's a change that's been made. There's a clear example of how that's not working.
But I would quite strongly contend that those cases that have been completed on a new system are not one of those children. Because I would have to look into details on that. But that's the reason we mentioned on to 11 weeks is because we cut away bureaucracy and created smoother systems, not because assessments are skimmed on.
Well, do you accept this, Tom? Do you accept that teachers, principals, schools, classroom assistants and parents are at absolute breaking point?
Yes.
Where's the light at the end of the tunnel? Because when they see letters like this coming this morning, that doesn't fill anybody with any hope.
A response on that question.
But this is exactly why we need to transform. If we don't transform, we won't have a light at the tunnel. Then we keep on doing the same thing, get the same results. If we do the same thing over and over again, we'll get the same results over and over again. We must change what we do, otherwise we will never improve. Right? I mean, I am absolutely passionate to improve the outcomes of children of SEN.
And I've no doubt.
I know no one is questioning me, right? But this is why we need to do these changes. We need to do these changes so we can fix those issues, so we don't continuously sit at this question. Because undoubtedly, come towards summer and autumn, we'll have many more of these stories.
But Thomas,
but that's
the
why
problem
we need to
is
fix
that
Final point, Cathy. We do need to draw a line.
Where the direction that this is going, and we've heard it time and again that it's not right. Where the direction this is going, it's too fast. The system isn't ready for it. The schools aren't ready for it. The schools aren't getting support. So why are we continuing to fire on ahead with this when we're hearing it from everywhere that it needs to halt, it needs to stop?
Because currently we're failing it every day.
So just continue on doing what we're doing.
I'm not sure that was what Thomas said there.
Opposite.
No,
Actually.
Opposite.
No, but continue on with the changes
yeah.
that we're making that are creating these issues.
But the changes are not creating the issues.
There's an example of it is.
Okay, Cathy, I'm going to bring Danny in now.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose what the Children's Law Centre are really concerned with my understanding when I read it this morning, and I thought it was very damning. I think people should take stock, and the foundations clearly aren't there, and they don't want the mistakes of the past to be repeated. Now I'll give my frustrations from being in this committee. I think I can go back as far as 2 years ago when I kept asking for the SEN regs, and I kept getting told they'll be here soon, and I asked that of the Minister, and I asked it when I was in here, because keep put back, and then we eventually get them. And I think you're seeing a lot of the groups reading through that now, and the speed of the proposed changes, because it's not just in SEN reform, it's in Transform Ed. There's many other consultations are coming to teachers. They are completely swamped. So the school's not ready. You're just going to create a situation of making it worse, even with the best intentions. So I do think there has to be a stop, a reset, and open that communication with like the likes of the Children's Law Centre. But it wasn't just them. There's teaching unions as well, and many other stakeholders all saying the same thing. The chair outlined it earlier on that there has been some positives, and people have said that. But it's an equal measure to things that aren't working. You know, the portal, we've heard it from Senkos, it isn't quite working. They're under stress and pressure as well. So there has to be that part where it can't just be seen as, oh, we're doing this and we're just going to plough on through because we've seen some improvements. There's definitely issues there that I'm no expert, but the Senkos are clearly said to us when they come in for evidence of our SEN inquiry. It was very damning what they were saying. I wasn't surprised at what the Children's Law Centre put out this morning. I'm really not. I was sort of, I think we were all expecting something to happen at some point, and I do think they need to take stock of it. And look, I can't speak for them, and I'm sure they'll clarify. I'm sure you've all been talking for a very long time, because we've seen it with the restraint and seclusion as well. The Children's Law Centre and the Children's Commissioner was completely ignored by the Minister himself. So they're trying to get engagement, so we can't just sit there and say, well, maybe they're not at the table, we're not getting to talk to them. I don't think that's cutting it. And I know I've went on a wee bit here, but Thomas, you asked me to judge you in a year's time, and I'll take the point that I asked these questions of you back in September, early September, and we're not at a year yet. But the fundamental problems that I see that come through my constituency office is children not being placed in the right setting, children being offered places that do not exist. That doesn't happen to mainstream children. And the fact that children then go into a setting and end up in reduced timetables, no one's even taking stock of those children. Nobody between yourselves or the department actually know how many children are missing out in school. That is a scandal of epic proportion, and nobody is prioritising that, because I haven't seen that improvement, because I know by what comes through my door and the support that people ask of me for their children. So you're not quite at the year. What would be your assessment of what I've outlined there back in September and now to where you're heading? Is it going to be better, or is it just the same?
The three things you mentioned are three things that troubles me massively. I can't put it in a different way.
I get that.
But when it comes to placement of children, do we intentionally place children in the wrong setting? Categorically not, right? Intentionally, right?
The problem with that is, right, and I'm sorry to come across you, but Kathy gave you just one scenario. I have others as well, where I'm not saying that people aren't trying their best, but there tends to be a pressure applied to parents when it comes to choices, where they'll come into me and say, well, I was told not to put that down, because if I do, I'll definitely not get that. And to me, that's a bit of a manipulation of it, because there's probably a worry about getting the children off a spreadsheet. And I know it sounds very crude in that way, but that's the way it comes across. And then the child does not end up in the right setting. Then they end up in that reduced timetable, and then they're sitting at home completely lost. But by the records, they are placed in school.
And it worries me greatly. I mean, what I'm saying is there's no intentionality behind it. And whether you trust me or not, that is, I mean, there's no such pressure on the statutory assessment team to place people just to get people off a spreadsheet.
I would say too, sorry Thomas, that there is considerable work going on to increase capacity so that there are more opportunities for placement right across the ecosystem. And
how many children are not going to be placed at the same time as their peers this year?
So I can't answer it at this point.
It's going to be in the hundreds.
But the reality we have is that the number of places we have to place children in does not match the number of children we have that needs places. Mm-hmm. I mean, that equation doesn't add up. And that is fundamentally the problem.
But it's always for the same cohort of children and families, though. There's always a place for mainstream children.
If you ask me how we fix some of these things, right? If you want radical solutions, when you think differently, right? So if you want to send children in all schools, we need to make provisions in the school numbers for send children in all schools. If send children always come in number wise here at the end, schools are full, right? But this is, I mean, as an authority, we can only work within the legislative context that we're finding ourselves in, which means that we come.
Would you argue then a send first approach to placement would actually work?
Whether send first, I think we need to think about how we think where the numbers go. I mean, we know we talked about this many times that some schools have more send children than other schools, and then we can argue about the reasons, because I think one reason is because many schools are good at it, and therefore they attract more. Which is good, but I
actually think they have a.
We are going to have to bring this one to
but I think that actually boils down 100% sure. I think it actually boils down to school leaders, in my view, who have been doing the heavy lifting to keep our schools going. Is the reason why you see that? Because their schools are not to single out any particular sector. They will not entertain children with additional needs into like a unit or a SPIM in their grounds. That is so clear.
And this is final comment.
If we can solve some of those issues, right? If we can solve how we can't send children in the numbers, we will solve a lot of these underlying issues of wrong placements. Sorry, that or the wrong placement, less suboptimal placement, better put it, because it's not wrong.
Okay, is send first really in placements ever really been seriously looked at?
That is, we'll pick that up for another time, and we really are up against it. Michelle, you're next.
Chair, thank you, folks. Where to start? Okay, so I think probably the right thing to do is to actually have you address the central question that CLC have asked in their letter. They have obviously presented, characterised how things are right now in terms of the pace of change. One thing they've mentioned here was, the sheer overwhelm already being felt by all those concerned with the education of children with SEND, due to the sheer volume of initiatives coming forward and consultations being published. So nobody is questioning that we need reform. There's a fundamental question over the pace of that reform and how that's coming through at the minute and the capacity within schools and the wider sector to be able to meaningfully engage, so they can have the trust and confidence that what you're doing is going to roll out in a way that it needs to deliver the impacts that we all want to see. So do you agree there should be a pause right now to kind of allow people the opportunity to do this better, or to do it in a way that builds their confidence, or can you make a case for continuing at the pace and at the way that you're doing it already now?
So there's two comments on pausing or not. I think for pausing now would be really dangerous, and there's two reasons. Not saying we shouldn't reflect, but stopping. One is that the current model does not provide as good outcomes for children and young people as we can. That means that every day where we're allowing current model to continue, we're providing we're agreeing that children should not have the best outcomes possible. And that is a position that I find very, very difficult to deal with. Secondly, is that the current model of assigning hours of classroom assistants is not sustainable. That we are in a position in the authority that in 12, 18 months' time, we will have to seriously start rationing classroom assistants because we can't employ.
I don't want to talk over you. I don't think anybody is disagreeing with any of what you said there. I think if I listen to even the comments from teachers today, people agree the reform and even the nature of the reform that you're proposing, they're not opposed to. The problem is if they have to deliver this, they have to have confidence in it, and they don't feel they have the time and space with everything else going on. So we're talking a lot about going back to this model and defending this model. No one is attacking what you're proposing. They're saying that their ability, and this is so crucial, that's why you're talking about this model, that's why you've prioritised it, it is so crucial, but getting it right might need more time, and then to implement it, and the people that you need to implement it right now are saying, you could produce this wonderful model, but our ability to actually realise it just feels like they're telling us.
I think the question, I think we should frame the question around implementation rather than pausing now. So the rural school that I mentioned earlier on, the rural primary school, that are now at the wit's end because the current model does not provide them with the tools they need. They want to go now. They want to start things now. So what we want to do with implementation in autumn is to allow those schools who already want to do things but can't to take a different approach. We're not imposing this on all other schools. So this is we're not saying that implementation starts everywhere as 1st September. What we want is that those who are willing and able to do things differently start. It will allow us to start the discussion in earnest in September with the trade unions about contract models, about career progression, those things. But we need to have a model to base it on. Okay. If we don't have the model, we can't do those next steps.
I want to give you a right to reply on the other main piece, which is around the legal stuff. And I just want to be clear. I know you've said you have some legal background. I have a law degree. It doesn't make me a lawyer. So I want to be clear. What legal advice have you sought that this is legally compliant and that you're not? And again, give us the confidence that you have sought advice and are confident that you can stand over, because Rachel is a barrister, that you're not unlawfully transferring, if you like, responsibility away from the EA to schools. Just to be really clear on that point.
I mean, we have internal lawyers in EA. So we obviously receive legal advice on a very regular basis. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what I really want to do with Rachel, because Rachel is incredibly smart and much smarter than most people I meet in my life, to be fair. I mean, I very much want to sit down and understand how she come to that position, because that is not our intention. So how do we need to express ourselves differently to make it clear that we're not doing that? Because that is absolutely not what we're intending to do. So this is. I mean, I'm assuming that we have said something or written something that they've interpreted something that we don't want to interpret as. So, but I want to work with them to find how to.
There are meetings in place early May, so and we did pick up engagement with them at that event last week. So, but that is ongoing. Mm-hmm. You know, so we will continue to engage. As Thomas said, if we've expressed something in the wrong way, then let's understand that.
So, again, there's a lot of lack of trust in a lot of this. And I will say that we have asked questions at the committee about these transformation projects many times, and you defended what was happening and that suggested perhaps there was too much happening and we needed to scale back. And again, you defended that what was happening was appropriate. So now we have changed things, and I welcome that. What was the tipping point for deciding that you needed to change that? And again, if you have robustly defended things before and you're robustly defending this again, I mean, it's fair that people might think you might shift again under pressure. So what?
Ask Deirdre to try and provide a brief answer on that.
So I suppose, I mean, it's always right that any big transformation programme challenges itself and has, you know, a check-in every at every sensible point to go, are we sure? Are we sure this is deliverable within the timeframes? And more importantly, are we sure that this will deliver the outcomes that we're looking for? In terms of looking at the projects that we had, it became, in discussions with EA and with other key stakeholder partners, it became clear that the deliverability was at risk on some of those projects. So rather than spread ourselves as thin as it was appearing, it seemed really sensible to focus on the key areas that we felt would be deliverable within the time frame and to take those forward. And so that was what was the tipping point in that discussion? That was in discussing with our key delivery partners, including EA.
I think you'll probably find that logic now will be reflected back on you in terms of what the pace and the amount of change that's happening now still is. I don't have time for another question, but I hope we may pick up. I'm surprised we don't have any breakdown of the figures and the costs with us today for this. I think it's an obvious point. We ask this all the time, that we never get the obvious financial breakdowns in these briefings. Thank you.
We can write back.
Be an undertaking to provide those. I think that'll be helpful to committee.
Yeah, can do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Michelle Cara, you'd indicated.
Thank you, Chair. My line of questioning actually is very similar to Michelle, so I'm going to do my best to not repeat the line of questioning. But just reading through the letter from the Children's Law Centre, one of the things that was highlighted and articulated really well was the point around the shortened 8-week consultation over the Easter holidays. And they noted they found this disrespectful and not compliant with EA statutory equality duties. Can you comment on that?
The EA's equality scheme says that we do 8-week consultations. It's not a shortened consultation. That's our equality scheme. It's on our website.
Do you think it's challenging that it happened over an Easter break, or that would have any impact given the burnout of our SEN staff?
There's always challenge when we run these run consultations. We run significant number of consultation events, not during the Easter break, but starting last week and now for a number of weeks. But timings are always difficult in these things. Whatever we do, there will be some timings that is difficult.
Okay. The letter also included the belief that the EA wishes to delegate legal duties to schools, and the Children's Law Centre views this as unlawful. Do you agree?
Yes. I mean, we do. Sorry, I agree that it would be unlawful, but we don't want to delegate legal duties to schools.
The enhanced support model, they believe that it's essentially diluting EA legal duties and conflicts with SEN law, not taking into account current workforce pressures. Do you agree?
No.
What level of engagement have you had with the Children's Law Centre following this letter, if any?
Following the letter, nothing. I mean, I was aware of the letter late last night.
Will you be engaging with them today, or have you already?
Today, I'm not engaged with them today because I've been in that period, Stormont most of the day.
Okay. There is the real profound sense of that there's a sudden urgency when it comes to SEN reform without bringing our school leaders, our teachers, our classroom assistants alongside. Are you picking that up in the engagement that you're having with our school leaders?
So I've spent a significant part of my first, how many months now it is, since August last year, in schools. Every single school leader, with virtually no exceptions, say that we must do things differently, right? So this is coming from everywhere. Every Senko I speak to said that we cannot keep doing what we're doing. We must do things differently. So this urgency and the pace of change, that is the problems with that is not what I hear from the school leaders and Senkos and classroom assistants I speak to. What I hear is a distrust of EA. Right? So they're saying to me over and over again, what you're saying is good, but can we really trust that you will do it? Right? Not that what we're saying is wrong. And there's a significant distinction between those two statements. That's why one of the reasons why I'm encouraged we keep on doing, because I mean I want to prove that we are not just saying that we're actually doing what we're saying. In the past, there's trust issues. We've discussed this many times.
It's
but the only way to fix it,
Well, the trust issues we're talking about today are pretty serious when we see the number of people who've signed this letter, don't you think?
Yes, at the same time, when I speak to classroom assistant teachers and Senkos and principals, they say we must change, and they say that the kind of change we're proposing in the transport model is what they want to see in schools.
But don't you find it concerning, given we have the National Autistic Society Fostering Network, ADDNI, the Centre for Children's Rights at Queen's, and a number of unions signing this? Would that not reflect that there is significant concern about this reform and the pace at which it is happening?
No, of course, and I'm already agreed with that there are concerns. But what I would encourage these organisations is to speak to us, engage in a public consultation, because that's how we can develop a model that works really well. That's why we're consulting. We're not consulting to tick a box. We're consulting to find the best model for children in our schools.
So just my last question in the interest of time then, if you have, say between now and the next month or two, a level of engagement with the people who signed this letter and they're still not happy, would you consider advocating or, moving towards a pause when it comes to these reforms? I think everybody wants reform. I know you're trying to make that distinction, and I think we all, right across the committee, all political parties want reform. We know our school leaders do too, but I think arguably this is about pace and people feel it's too much too soon. So if you continue to see in the level of engagement that you're having, a large number of people want to pause, will that be something you will consider?
I mean, here, and I mean this very genuinely, this is a public consultation. We want to hear from what the public, as in everyone involved, thinks. We must, at the end of that, we will decide what we think the right outcome as a result of the consultation is. I don't have a predetermined view either way, because I genuinely believe that in public consultations it's a really important part of the decision-making process. So, I mean, I don't want to say what decisions we're going to make at the end of consultation now, either way, because I have a complete blank mind to how we take this forward afterwards. We have a proposal of a way forward. If there are other proposals that are better, if there are strong reasons why we should do things differently, of course, they're part of our constitution. That's why we're doing this. I mean, I'm not, but I don't want to give promises either way, because I don't have a predetermined position for an outcome at all.
Well, that's okay. We'll hopefully have the minister as soon as possible before committee so we can probe further. But I thank you for your response. But I think overwhelmingly what I'm hearing in my constituency is parents, teachers, school leaders, and particularly classroom assistants feel really overwhelmed by the number of changes that are forthcoming. And while they welcome change and they welcome reform, it is just the speed and the pace, and they're feared that their voices are being left behind. But I really do. I respect your answers, and I'll definitely have more questions for the minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. And Peter.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mine are fairly simple. Danny and I had some debate earlier about SEN numbers and whether they had risen or not. In the first instance, Thomas, can you tell me whether SEN numbers have risen over the last 10 years in general terms?
So it's important to think we're talking about. There's been an increase in SEN over the last 10 years, absolutely. There's been a significant increase in the children with statement of SEN. There's a the number of children with statement SEN has increased more than the number of children on the SEN registers.
Okay, but you would agree it's gone up?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the numbers I have here, there's been a 5% rise over the last 10 years of those kids who are statemented. Does that create additional pressure on the system in terms of delivering the best outcomes for each of those individual children?
I could just correct the numbers. So there's 32,000 children, 9.1% of the whole school population have a statutory assessment of SEN. So it's up 44% since 21-22. The numbers of children with this statement of SEN.
And the number of children with SEN, both at all stages, always increase the work pressures in education, absolutely.
Yeah. So back to your question, does that put pressure on the system? Absolutely it does.
Okay, and if we just keep the same system as we have, is that responsive to the needs of those children and the fact that we have additional children in that system who are requiring support?
The simple answer is no. I mean, I would go so far to say that for children with a statement of SEN, the current model is not deliverable past 12, 18 months from now, because we will simply don't have people to employ. I mean, we will have children that have no support, even though they have a statement, because they're simply impossible to fill posts. we will have to start a system of rationing support if we keep on doing what we're doing.
Yep. Okay, so the CLC statement says that the implementation of the revised SEND framework must stop now to allow sufficient time to assess whether the current trajectory refers it to be significantly altered. What would, if that happened, if we just stopped it, what would be the implications? I'm not talking about the system. What are the implications for children who need support in this area?
So it's our assessment that the children in Northern Ireland with SEN don't have the support they need to receive the outcomes that they deserve. That's compared with other jurisdictions and so on. If every day we do not transform, we accept that our children have suboptimal outcomes. And again, I want to stress, just to make absolutely clear, this is not because of people in the system. It's because the people are not giving the right tools to work, to do their very good job in the system.
Okay. And I think in terms of this committee and discussions we've had today, I mean, people are maybe talking about certainly the pausing this reform agenda. CLC have been a lot stronger in terms of they said it must stop. I mean, would you, for example, would you welcome engagement with the Children's Law Centre in terms of, I mean, Thomas, you've been quite, clear in your willingness to engage with them, to understand, because I get a sense that, I think you wanted the best, EA want the best for some of our most vulnerable kids in Northern Ireland. CLC in their letter have certainly indicated that their heart is to try and find the best approach. I mean, do you think there will be some engagement between yourselves and CLC to understand more fully why they've written some of the things that they have in this letter?
Oh, I mean, both Deirdre and I have separate meetings in our diaries with CLC in May.
Early May.
If CLC want to meet this week, I will do everything kind of facilitate that. I mean, I will speak to anyone who wants to speak to me. It's simply just finding times in our diaries, of course. But that's, I mean, anyone who wants to speak to us can speak to us. We are open to anything. I mean, I've said before I enjoy coming to this committee, and I know there's been some comments around that. It's because I believe that constructive debate and challenge is how we drive change and improvement forward. And I stand over that every day of the week. If we are wrong, we need to fix what we're doing wrong. But we can only do that by having constructive debate and discussion on what we're proposing and what we're doing.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Look, thank you both.
Sure, could I ask a quick question?
Yeah, it would need to be very brief.
Because, I mean, it seems to be that it was like a bolt out of the blue that this statement came from the Children's Law Centre. Are you telling this committee now that you were totally unaware of how they felt about the way things were going?
We had some indication from the conference on Thursday that they were not that there were issues with. To this extent, it was complete surprise to me last night.
Okay. I know.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. And from having attended the conference, Children's Law Centre did contribute on the day, but certainly didn't make any public declaration. A letter was coming at that stage. Look, thank you both for your for your evidence today. I appreciate we really did push the timings for yourselves further than we would like, so that I do want to acknowledge that. That there will undoubtedly be ongoing engagement far beyond the inquiry that we're running, and we do appreciate the time you've given us today, and we'll no doubt be hearing from you again soon, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so just while the witnesses are making their way out, in terms of actions arising from that briefing, we had an undertaking from Deirdre that she would provide the breakdown of the figures and the costings for each of the transformation projects. I think that would be very helpful to have in terms of tracking how those progress. We already agreed correspondence to the Minister and the CEO of the EA at the start of the meeting. Is there anything else we want to add at this stage? Just remind members again, that is our final session in the inquiry, and we do need to begin to be moving into the space, and we'll have hopefully a session on that next week to really start thinking about the recommendations arising from the inquiry. Danny?
Yeah, Chair, don't want to get into a debate. I know I was just leaving the room as Peter was saying. Children, the percentage of the population, and this is the point that we really heard from the autism reviewer, that in the population that has never really changed. Children being identified has become better, And that's why you're seeing the raise in numbers, and that's why there's that more support is needed, because a lot of children with very complex medical needs in particular may never have got into school in the past. So we heard that very clearly. I think that just needs to be really hang in the minutes. I'm not questioning the raise of support that's needed. It's just about the population, and that's important because we've heard rhetoric from people like Donald Trump, from Reform UK, and those type of politicians, and from quarters within the DUP as well. It's not nice for parents to hear that.
I'm very, very conscious of time here, Peter. You do need the right of reply, but it would need to be a brief one. And we had rehearsed this earlier in the meeting, so it just that we need to be conscious the examiner of statutory rules is waiting to come through.
Yeah, I have a grudging respect for Danny that he manages to get Donald Trump into a SEN debate. So to a degree, I agree with him. I think what he's suggesting is that the assessment and diagnosis of SEN is getting better, and that's why the numbers are increasing. I would disagree with them that actually that's not the whole of the picture, and actually whilst that's part of the picture, we have an increasing number of children who are presenting who have needs that we would not have seen 15 years ago. And my understanding of that is it's social media, it's smartphones, it's all of that kind of stuff. It is all that sort of stuff.
That's absolutely not what the autism reviewer said. And that's why we said Donald Trump. Sorry, but Donald Trump was saying around paracetamol. That's how rhetoric that really hurts families. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Danny.
Sorry.
I think it is important if I asked you to not continue remarks that you do to respect that, because we really are up against it with time. If we had all the time in the world, we could hammer this debate out to the nth degree.
Aren't you watching?
I'm going to know I do understand that, but I also think if we're going to discuss these issues, we need to do them justice, and we don't have the time to do them justice here. And so I'm going to suggest we draw a line at this stage, and if members want to pick it up as a matter arising at another time, they can do so. So members, that's item 8 on the agenda. Then is the General Teaching Council Bill, and it's an oral briefing from the Examiner of Statutory Rules. I'm going to seek members' agreement that we move into closed session for this, as it will be legally privileged advice. Are we agreed?
Great.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Okay, members, that's us back into open session. And just to confirm, the committee received legal advice in relation to the regulation making powers in the bill, and also discussed a potential committee amendment in relation to clause 12 of the bill, but a decision was taken not to progress that. So the only other item to cover on this then is we had commissioned RAISE to make further queries regarding comparative approaches to the responsibilities of GTC. Paper details a comparison of regulators, and my understanding, even I think during the meeting, is we've had further more detailed information come through from some of the other regulators, and the feeling from RAISE is that what is being proposed by the department potentially would make Northern Ireland an outlier in terms of the approaches being taken, and they have suggested we may want to have the opportunity to hear evidence from the other regulators. Now, I am conscious of time in terms of our committee stage, and the clock is starting to tick a little on that. If it could be factored into an agenda, even potentially getting those, remotely getting those regulators to present a short evidence session, even via Zoom, would members be open to that, to just try and establish, why they operate the systems they do, and some of the consequences the department has been highlighting, around, a dysfunctional council, whether those are issues that those regulators encounter. Is that something we're in agreement on? Is there an interest in receiving that evidence? Again, I'm putting it out for committee.
Not particularly.
No, so no interest in that from your side.
I don't think it would do any harm.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think it would probably not be unhelpful to hear that evidence. The other side to it is we do have, if the written material from the regulators can be provided to committee, then perhaps we'd be better informed to make that decision. But I'm not hearing great enthusiasm on that evidence session. So
I'm not opposed to it. But if you want to go ahead with it, fair enough.
So I'm content to suggest that we receive the written briefings that the regulators have provided, and if anyone feels the need for an oral briefing on the back of that, to propose that. We agreed?
I think that's mostly been received.
Yeah.
There was just one issue. The department referred to Wales as having been the main comparator in the model that it came up with, and there are, nonetheless, the proposal here is an outlier position in certain respects. So,
would it be appropriate then to write to the department on that to seek their clarity as to why they have highlighted the Welsh model as really what Northern Ireland is going to align with, when in fact RAISE are highlighting it as being really setting up a different model? I think there is an issue around certain members being appointed to their regulator, and that wouldn't be happening here. So if we're content on that action, we can take that forward.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So that is everything on item 8. So we will move on to item 9 now, and that is the SL1 on the Education School Development Plans Regulations Northern Ireland 2026. So we have a memo from the clerk and tabled papers, and we have the SL1 at page 237 and an explanatory memorandum at page 244. So very briefly, the purpose of the legislation is to modernise and simplify how grant-aided schools plan for improvement. The statutory rule is subject to draft negative resolution before the Assembly. So I want to seek members' agreement that we issue a call for views for each SL1 using the standard survey, and to publish the SL1, the draft SR, and any relevant documents from the department on the committee website. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Great. and I think there's no other actions on that, so we're content to move on to item 10 on the agenda. So that is the SR, the Education Pupil Regulations, Northern Ireland 2026. So look, that is in your packs at pages 248 to 251, but we are going to be proposing another deferral on that, as the examiner statutory rules is not in a position to report on that, but anticipates doing so now on the 24th of April, as there are some due diligence queries that continue just in relation to the drafting of that rule. It's not considered good practice to report on an SR without having considered the examiner's report, and we do have a timeline that runs until the 12th of May on this. So are we agreed to defer the consideration of that rule until that report is available? Agreed? Okay, item 11 was to be a virtual tour of the Wish Charter Schools, which I'm sure we're all very glad has been rescheduled, given they are. So we'll move on to item 12, and that is correspondence. So we don't have a huge amount of correspondence, so we'll be able to get through this quickly, I hope. Pages 255 to 343, we have items tabled for correspondence with a summary note at page 255. I'll just highlight the ones needing committee action or decision. Item 12.2 on page 256, correspondence from Dr. Karen Kerr providing a report on outdoor learning in Northern Ireland schools. So happy to hear members' views, but I would propose we forward that to the department for their response, particularly around with the actions the department's taking on an outdoor learning strategy, which the committee had brought forward as a motion to the House. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Item 12.4, page 326, it's correspondence from the department on the department's response to the independent review of statutory assessment and the new policy framework for statutory assessment. So I want to be clear when I propose this that I'm not suggesting it should in any way prioritise any of our legislative work. It may well be after summer recess, but I think it would be worthwhile hearing a briefing on this in terms of the what the new assessment regime will look like, if members are agreed that we do seek that briefing. Item 12.6, correspondence from the Northern Ireland Environment Link, updating on its work regarding education for sustainable development and its engagement with the curriculum task force, also offering engagement with the committee. I would want to suggest we share that correspondence with the department and ask for them to provide a response on where the curriculum task force's work sits in terms of education for sustainable development. It was a theme that came through clearly in our stakeholder event, if members are agreed. Agreed. Other than that, are members content to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note at page 255? Great. Item 13, forward work programme. So that is in your packs at page 345. So look, it is obviously subject to bill timelines and evidence sessions that need to be fitted in, and we will have to have a degree of flexibility and also anticipated departmental legislation. But I think given the time, if I can just suggest that members give their agreement to endorse that as drafted currently. Agreed. Item 14 is any other business. Is there any other business? Very glad to say there is not. Item 15 is date, time and place of next meeting. Next meeting scheduled for Wednesday the 29th of April, 2 p.m, room 29 and online. And that's here in Parliament Buildings, room 29. And leaves me to put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed? Agreed.
Committee room 29. Sound. Committee room 29. Sound.